You're live, Your Worship.
Great, thank you. All right, Council, I'd like to call this regular council meeting of October 10th, 2023 to order with adoption of the agenda. So I want to make that motion for me. Councillor Cherry, seconded by Councillor Devlin. All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Adoption of the minutes of the special council meeting of April 13th. Someone want to make that motion? Councillor Devlin, Councillor Cherry, all in favor? Motion's carried. Adoption of the regular council meeting of September 26th. Someone want to make that motion? Councillor Devlin, Councillor Staphenhurst, all in favor? Motion's carried. Any business arising from the special council meeting minutes of April 13th? Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Mayor Solis. Just curious, that special meeting was quite some time ago. Was it just an oversight for coming back?
Yes.
So, and further to that, Mayor Solis, Councillor Orlando was not here at that meeting. I don't know if you had an opportunity in the past because, or you weren't part of that because of the conflict of interest at that time. And just regarding that, I just wondering if, sorry for catching you off guard, you may have no comment at all, but just any comments regarding the blanket change of density at RMR, any comments?
I mean, to be forthright, I would appreciate a heads up if I'm going to be called to make a comment on a complex file like that. My question was that I had about this was yours, is why are we adopting an agenda from April 13th now? And I assumed it was something like as was explained there. Before us right now is adoption of the minutes of an entire meeting. I think it's, usually just comes and goes without comments and whatnot. So I don't have a comment.
Yeah,
so.
okay, that's fair. Yeah, and I did think about that, but anyway, that's, thanks.
Okay.
It's, I guess it just maybe a little bit further, Mayor Solis, because it was a pretty significant item, and I think a number of us expressed regret that Councillor Orlando wasn't able to participate at that time, and at this point we move on. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Any business arising from the minutes of the regular council meeting of September 26th? Seeing none, I am going to move right on to announcements from the mayor. Just want to say good to see everybody back and present here in the room. Glad we all made it through Thanksgiving, and good to see everyone here. Going to move on to 8A, recommendations from committees. Finance Committee of September 27th, public engagement regarding the budget. Someone want to put that motion on the table for me? Councillor Lucelle.
I move that public engagement program for the 2024 budget include advertisement in the local paper, creation of the Talk Rebels Built project page, an open house on November 29th, 2023, and opportunities for public feedback in the form of written correspondence.
Okay, and you need that second part? Or you want that separate?
That's separate, please.
Okay. Seconder for this motion, please, Councillor Cherry. Any discussion on the engagement program for the budget? Councillor Orlando.
Your worship, it's always great to get engagement from community members on important document. However, reflecting back on the past 16 years, I've been attending meetings in this chamber. Often there's not a lot of comment. It's got talking down a little bit, and often the same stakeholder groups do comment on there. So having said that, I don't really expect that it will be different this year, that, one year there will be a flood of comments. Sometimes it can be on one particular item or issue in there. However, I guess I just wanted to ask a question / comment in terms of making sure that anybody who does want to comment is aware of the opportunity, and that is advertising in the newspaper is a legal requirement. Talk Rebel Stoke is a great tool for engaging residents and getting questions out there. But in terms of that last step of outreach to people, what is planned beyond what is listed in the resolution right now? I'm just wondering how we can make sure that everybody who may want to be aware or has an interest in commenting will be aware of the opportunity, and we'll also have a clear message from the city that we are interested in hearing from them and do want to hear what they have to say.
Great. Ms. Moore, any further comment?
Through your worship, and response to Councillor Orlando, we plan to do similar advertising as we have in previous years through social media posts, the radio, and various other outlets, and not just the newspaper. We'll put it in the weekly newsletter that goes out as well. So we'll be looking at probably 3 to 5 different avenues for advertising, and hoping to give citizens 2 to 3 weeks notice before the date. So.
Follow-up?
Your worship, no, thank you. I think the city's email newsletter is a great opportunity for this. I think, and thank you for mentioning that, Director Moore. I think that's a great opportunity, and I just want to put a plug to anyone listening. Go to our website, sign up for the email, and you will be sure to catch all of these items as they come forward and engagement opportunities. So thank you.
Any other comments from council? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? No. Motion's carried unanimously. Part 2 of this, Councillor Lucien.
That BDO Canada LLP be appointed as the city's external auditors for fiscal years 2023 to 2027 based on RFP submitted.
Seconder for the motion, please, Councillor Stapehurst. Any further discussion on the auditors? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Moving on to 9A, permits of tax exemption bylaw. Someone want to put that motion on the table for Councillor Lucien?
I move that the 2024 property tax exemption bylaw number 2368 be read a first, second, and third time.
Seconder for that motion, please, Councillor Cherry. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. Moving on to item B, zoning bylaw text amendment application 2023-002. Mr. Simon, do you have any presentation or comments you'd like to make?
To your worship, through to all of council, Ms. Hartling does have a presentation prepared today, should council wish to have a presentation on this file.
Yes, please. Ms. Hartling.
All right, thank you, Your Worship. I'll just share my screen here.
Thank you.
Just before I start, I just want to make sure that you can see the presentation before you.
We can, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So before council today, we have a zoning bylaw text amendment. It's to the comprehensive development zone CD 17. This is under application zone 2023-002, and it applies to multiple properties under that site specific zone. So I'll just go through the presentation overview. I'll be going over the background details, proposal overview, policy directions, staff evaluation, and then the staff recommendation for council's consideration. So just a bit of the subject property background details. There's multiple properties here under the CD zone. The lands are part of a phased multi-family mixed use development. So there's 12 phases. Currently, you see before you sub-area D, sub-area A, and sub-area B, part of different phases. So there are sub-areas A to F. Properties are all accessed off a Nickel Road with internal roadways, and there's green space throughout the proposed phase development, as well as city sewer and water connections. So what you see before you is sub-area D, which is currently developed, the first phase of the Mackenzie Village development with apartment houses, and then phase 2, which includes sub-area A, which has 2 buildings, and sub-area B, 2 buildings that are currently constructed. And these are mixed-use buildings with commercial uses at grade, and then residential on the top, multi-story buildings, top floors. So sub-area A and B within the phase development are the areas that have the slated commercial uses and are subject to majority of this application in front of you. The remaining lands are currently undeveloped, but for future residential construction as part of the overall Mackenzie Village project. So as noted, it's zone CD 17. The designation for the entire area is mixed use. And then the properties also fall under the multifamily residential and multifamily residential mixed use development permit areas, and then the environmental sensitive and environmental hazardous areas. So to get into the proposal overview, you'll see it's a text amendment to the site-specific zone, the comprehensive development zone. So you have sub-area A and B, and you'll see the image on the right-hand of your screen has all the letters where the sub-areas are located. So sub-area A and B is proposed to be amended for commercial small-scale service and retail shops from maximum floor area of 200 square meters to a maximum of 450 square meters. Sub-area A has proposed additional uses. So that's just buildings 4 and 3 you can see in the image just below the sub-area. So that's for added uses of professional service establishments. So example, like lawyer's office, chiropractor, any of those professional service establishments. Licensee retail store pursuant to the Liquor Control and Licensing Act. This is also known as a liquor store. The LCRB has different names for different uses. So this is specifically for a liquor store, as a liquor primary is a neighborhood pub, which is already permitted in the zone. So this is just for liquor store. Sub-area B, addition of a local convenience store, retail store, professional service establishment, and then a liquor store. And then amendment to sub-areas A, B, C, D, E, F, all areas, which is to remove the maximum setback requirement for principal buildings. You'll typically see a minimum setback from the property line for where buildings can be sited. And our zoning bylaw does not have maximums within only the specific zone, which is not very typical of a zone. I can get into that in the staff evaluation. But what you see here is the floor plan layout. So these buildings are built and existing. And so the example shows some increased size of units that are planned and proposed to have a wall removed to create a larger commercial space. The applicant does have proposed establishments that have shown or asked for increased floor areas, which are for restaurants. The applicant has their office space and showroom that they would like to have larger. And then there is a proposed grocery, you can see on the right-hand side there, up to 310 square meters that they would like to have larger. These increase in sizes don't change the size of the building. Those are already built. Max floor plan for the entire building is done. So they are looking at increased sizes within the existing building. So they have a total of 19 commercial units between the buildings with floor areas 200 square meters or less in the current zone, and they're proposing to have 450 for flexibility of specific businesses going in that have requested more space. So just getting into the policy direction, staff evaluation, looking at the mixed use land use designation, and also the Arrow Heights neighborhood policies. So the 3 buildings in sub-area A and B, they have already been constructed, as I mentioned, and the permitted floor area of commercial unit up to 450 will not be feasible or applied to for every unit within the building, just due to the building configuration that's already been constructed. Most of the units are under 200 square meters or less. The increased floor area would only be feasible for 1 to 5 units within the constructed building that may need a larger space than 200 square meters. Most would be between 200, 350 square meters, with some options of being larger for some of the units. A mixture of commercial units is supported, and the addition of the new use of a liquor store and professional service establishments will provide residents of the neighborhood with a variety of local commercial services. Retail, store, and convenience store uses that are requested to be added to sub-area B, they're already permitted in sub-area A within building 3 and 4. So this would be allowing an extension into building 2, depending on timing of businesses going in, that they have the option of a space within that commercial development, either in building 3, 4, or 2. A maximum setback, this regulation is noted is not typically a setback that planning staff would recommend within a zoning bylaw. It would be typical to a pre-approved building plan layout and subdivision plan that is set in stone. With the proposed phasing and timing of this subject property and subdivisions throughout subject lands, we would be seeing a variance for every single building going in, likely just with the subdivision and the lot plans not being specifically decided. You would look at a maximum setback reduction probably every single time. So this would, staff highly recommend that this be removed. So for public notification, we did a complete advertising as per the Local Government Act. These were in the Revelstoke Review, September 28th and October 5th. And 259 properties were captured in the area and received landowner letters more than 15 days prior to the council meeting. And 34 public submissions, they are attached to the council package for your review, are included that provided comments on the proposal. And if staff have any comments or questions for that, please let me know. The staff recommendation is in front of you today, and the applicant is in attendance if council has any specific questions. Thank you.
So before we put anything on the table, council, any questions for Ms. Hartling? So Ms. Hartling, my question, when this originally came to council and it was approved for build, I think the recommendation was to keep the square meters at 200, and council abided by that. And now there's changes because there may be potential for other people to go in, or some people we are hearing that may be wishing larger. Is this the only way to give larger space for these retail spaces?
Through your worship, as they are grouped under, you can bring up the zone if you like, they are grouped all together. So say if a grocery store or a restaurant want increased size, like a restaurant, say they're taking up a lot of room for kitchen and washrooms, they want to increase and take out a wall between 2 units, we do need to amend this specific section. It's within, it's not a variance because it's within the permitted uses, the definitions, or sorry, the permitted uses section. It specifically has that size, whereas it would be a variance if it was in the regulatory table of that CD zone. But it was added to all of the commercial service retail shops in the permitted uses section. So it does have to be an amendment and a rezoning for this size request. The applicant has requested 450 square meters for flexibility of businesses going in. And this is what's for council consideration. If council wishes to have a different recommendation, there are other recommendations that are alternative council options available to council if there are any changes or scenarios that council wishes staff to review with the applicant. But yeah, it does have to be a rezoning for this, for these uses. If it was that you wanted to only do a size restriction to specific uses listed under the size restriction, so there's, if you don't mind, I'll just bring up my screen here. Can you see the zoning bylaw text amendment in front of you?
Yes.
Thank you. So if council wishes, like the neighborhood commercial, it says each small service and retail shops limited to 450 square meters, including the following uses. So all of these uses is restricted to that size, and it is in the permitted uses section instead of the regulatory table with all of the setbacks and parcel coverage and all those items. So if there are certain uses here that council is considering wanting to keep with 200 square meters, that's up to council to consider. Right now, it's a blanket, all of these uses up to 450 square meters, which staff feel confident with and comfortable with due to the building already being constructed in the floor layout. If it was a vacant parcel and the building plans hadn't been decided and the floor layouts weren't constructed, then it might be where you do put a floor area restriction in the regulatory table for certain uses, but it does group cafes, neighborhood pubs, convenience stores, retail services, retail store, daycare, dog daycare all together. And many of these uses would have a different floor area. So they're trying to slate in all of these uses within the existing building, but there is that restriction to 200 square meters. And some of the uses the applicant has noted, just that the neighborhood pub, restaurant, and grocery store being desirable to have a larger than 200 square meter floor area. Sorry, there's a lengthy answer.
I appreciate that. Councillor Stapener's comment.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Through the chair to Ms. Hartling, I have a question. Is this amendment going to be affecting all, and maybe I'm not understanding this clearly, but is this amendment going to be affecting all of the zones, or is it only affecting zones A, B, and D? Or sorry, it would be A and B because D's already built. There's no commercial, so it would. So my question is this applying to all the zones, or is this just for zones A and B?
Ms. Hartling.
Yeah, through your worship. So I'll just bring this up. Can you see the presentation in front of you?
Yes.
So you'll just see the sub area letters there, A and B. So the size restriction is only to A and B and only for commercial units. So area A has 2 buildings with ground floor space, and then area B has 1 commercial building with ground floor space being commercial. It would only be to those 3 buildings in the entire development. And these are the only area for commercial within the entire Mackenzie Village development in phases or sub areas. So it'd just be sub area AB with the size restriction. And then when you get into the permitted uses that are being amended, you have sub area A, which is the addition of professional service establishments and liquor store. And you'll see sub area B, the applicants requested local convenience store and retail store in addition, as these uses are already permitted in sub area A, and they're looking at the option of having them in area B so that building 2 has the option of those uses too. So sub area A and B commercial, those 3 buildings would have the option of having the same uses throughout all 3 buildings for more flexibility for businesses and timing of businesses going in. And then what is all the sub areas, the only amendment for that is removing the maximum setback requirement. So that's within the zone, there's a building can't be set back more than 3 meters from some areas it's 12. But then there's also minimum. So it's just looking at removing the maximum setback, but keeping those minimums. So they can't be closer than a certain distance from the property line. If that answers your question.
Thank you for that comment. Councillor Paul.
Thank you, Mayor Souls. So just Mayor Souls, further to your question, more from the lens of not the technicalities or if I'm understanding your question correctly, is rather than doing the rezoning, so if there's a specific unit that wanted a change to allow for a grocery store or whatever it was, is there another way of doing that? And I guess just further to it, because I was wondering the same question, could that be done on a variance in this building to make that one change? So forget about all the other aspects of this whole scenario, but if there was just saying, okay, we want to go larger for a grocery store, for example, could that have been done through a variance?
Sure.
And is that sort of?
That's kind of where I was going. So, Ms. Hartling, I'm here, if I'm hearing you correctly, that we're talking generalities in the whole scheme of things, but getting right down to what Councilor Palmer is asking, can we do that without having to go through this and just do a quick variance in response to that?
And that's hypothetically, that's not
Yeah.
the application for
Yeah.
us. Yeah.
Through your worship, in the future, if this was added to the regulatory table, yes, you could do a variance to floor area because it is a size, but because the CD zone has it embedded within the listed uses, it's a rezoning because it's changing an item under the permitted uses, and we, under the Local Government Act, we're not to change density or use with a variance application. It's a rezoning. So if it was in a different section of the zone, then this would not be paired with the changes to the amended uses. It would just be a variance coming to council. You could be more specific with that. If council wishes for the zone to be structured in a different way, that it is within the regulatory table and moved, that's at council's discretion. Staff currently are amending the section that was how it was written in the original CD zone. So I can just, I'm not sure if you want me to bring that up for you again, but yeah, it's within the permitted uses, so a variance is not possible for that in the future unless it was put into the regulatory table away separate from permitted uses.
Thank you. Follow
Yeah, and I'm going to come back to that in a moment. So just for clarity on the use changes in the bylaw, the proposed bylaw. So I know that some of them are in italics and some are just in regular font. Is there a difference between those, or the ones in regular font, the additional uses being added?
Through your worship to Councillor Palmer. Anything that's italicized for the bylaw has a corresponding definition, and then anything that's not italicized does not have a definition in a different section of the bylaw, and it is intended to be a use that doesn't require a definition.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so then just because it's a bit complex, just on sub area A, what are the new uses? I know it's in your report, but what are the new uses being added, being proposed to be added for sub area A?
Sub area A additional uses are professional service establishment and then licensee retail store pursuant to Liquor Control and Licensing Act. So professional service establishments are like a chiropractor, physio, massage therapist, dentist, different professional services that typically have, it could be, yeah, anything with a designation where they have a professional association typically, and it's usually like it could be, it's more service-based. Yeah. And then a licensee retail store is a liquor store. So all the other ones listed there, like cafe, restaurant, neighborhood pub, local convenience store, neighborhood retail services, retail store, daycare, dog daycare, professional or personal service establishments, we didn't change those. So the neighborhood retail service, that was added in with the original adoption of the CD17 zone, but we just didn't touch any other of the uses in the zone. This zone definitely could use, we are looking at updates with the zoning bylaw, and it's something where we're trying to consolidate uses that have the intent and meaning is the same thing, but within these CD zones, it looks.
Ms. Hartman.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, Mayor Sills, I'm really trying to zone in one little question that I'm just trying to understand. And I just thank you for my patience. So on sub area A, to make this a bit simpler, hypothetically again, right now a permitted use is cafes and restaurants, correct? And that's just a yes or no answer.
Ms. Hartling, correct?
Through your worship, correct, yes.
Yeah, so if the only application before us was to increase the maximum size of a restaurant, could we do that through a variance rather than a rezoning?
Comment, Ms. Hartling?
Hypothetically.
Mr. Simon, you have your hand up. You want to make comment?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to add some clarity, because I think we're going down some potential rabbit holes here, although it's a very important conversation to have. So the application that's before council today is to add a couple extra uses into sub area A. Sub area B is adding uses so that we have consistent uses between areas A and B. Those are the only two areas within Mackenzie Village that are permitted to have commercial. This isn't looking to increase total amount of commercial space. They're restricted to 3,000 square meters in sub area A, and they are within that requirement. And we can't do this via a variance because of the way that the original zone was drafted. When you take development regulations, the ones that Ms. Hartling had highlighted there, and you embed them as part of the use, you would be varying a use, which Ms. Hartling indicated is not permitted under the Local Government Act. So if council wanted to direct staff to amend the zone to include those development regulations in the appropriate location, it would be convoluting the process, and it would require a text amendment followed by a variance. And one of the things we need to be mindful of is the application that's before council today is what has been submitted by the proponent. If council wants to further restrict maximum square footage size of 200 square meters to some specific uses that council deems appropriate to restrict it to, so that it's not just a blanket increase for every use that's permitted in the zone, that is something that can be accomplished. So for example, if council says retail services, we don't want that aside from a grocery store being greater than 200 square meters, we can do an amendment to the amending bylaw to address that. So very important for council to be giving that feedback if there's specific uses that you have concerns with being greater than 200 square meters in size.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. So Councillor Stapenhurst.
Yeah, so my understanding, I understand that we're looking to add professional services and liquor store licenses, and I'm just wondering if anybody here can correct me if I'm mistaken, but I do believe that the LRCB has a moratorium that's going to expire July 1st, 2032. So in 9 or 10 years from now.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that.
So that's, just something to, we're having a big lengthy debate regarding the two uses, but one's not really, there's a moratorium on licenses until July 1st, 2032. So that's just my comment.
Any comment, Ms. Hartling, Mr. Simon?
Through your worship, I'm not familiar with the moratorium. If Councillor Stapenhurst wants to elaborate, but I'm not sure if you're meaning that's on licensee retail stores or if that's on liquor primary, manufacturer, or if that's on a specific licensee establishment type.
Okay, I'm going to stop here for a second. I have a member of the gallery that has their hand up, and I usually don't go to the gallery. I can't see who the person is because they're directly behind the TV here. So if you just want to stand up, hi, how are you? And do you have a comment on this that you want to make? Identify yourself and then give me the benefit of your comment, because you seem to be pretty animated when it comes to the liquor store stuff.
Yeah, I just, Mr. Chair, I thought maybe I could add a piece of information might be helpful for
Sure.
council.
And you are?
And my name is Richard Tucker, Mackenzie Village.
Good, thanks, Richard. I need that for the record, that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, go ahead. I'll allow you to make comment right now.
It's very simple. The person we have in mind has a license already. And so
Okay.
you're correct about the moratorium, but and the reason why we're making these applications, we have specific people who are looking for these spaces.
Okay, thank you for that comment, because that clarifies where we go with this sort of thing. Thank you for that. And I apologize for deviating from what we normally do, but it was important to get that information out there. All right, so I want to go back to the motions that we have prepared in our package. We're looking at basically allowing this zone to go up to 450 square meters, which is around 5,000 square feet For us old people, is that correct, Mr. Simon? Yeah, and Mr. Black's laughing because he knows exactly, because we are the same generation. Oh, maybe not. There we go. Oh, sorry about that.
Very close.
Yeah, so any other comments from council regarding this before we put a motion on the table? Any comments, Councillor Orlando?
Hi, Your Worship. I have a couple questions for staff. First of all, just to confirm my understanding, although the presentation does contain schematics for specific units, combining specific units within the development, retail units, the changes we're making today would apply to any changes we make today would apply to both areas A and B, respective of what is specifically mentioned for A and B. So not just this unit or those two units that have combined, other ones could be combined in the future if changes were made at the stage.
Ms. Hartling, follow-up comment?
Through your worship, yes, that's correct. It's to the entire sub area, A and B, which would include all three buildings. That's correct.
Okay, Your Worship. Thank you. And through the chair, another question focused on outreach to the community. I was, or actually, no, I've got two more questions. I was just trying to go through, and you know what, there was a bit of confusion for me regarding what uses were changed. I was having a bit of difficulty cross-referencing the second linked document here, which is the amendment bylaw, and the original bylaw. There was, as Councillor Palmer mentioned, a bit of confusion with the italicized text, as well as the regular font text, as well as formatting for the original to understand the details of what is being proposed here. And so I guess my comment would be that may cause others confusion, members of the public confusion. And then furthermore, a question that I had regarding outreach to the public. I couldn't find it today, but I did look at it the other day when I was, before the weekend when I was looking at it. But one question I had, and then I did notice somebody did write in with the same concern in the comments section, was the notice, and I don't know if this is the newspaper notice or the, I believe it was the letter. I don't think I've seen the newspaper notice, but I think it was the letter that went out to residents, mentioned that it was before council for first reading. And I'm just, and what is reflected on the agenda today is first reading, second reading, and final adoption. So I'm just trying to understand the clarity about why where the discrepancy arises from those, or if that's based on my misunderstanding.
Ms. Hartling, feedback, please.
Yeah, through your worship to Councillor Orlando. So the Local Government Act was changed to not outright require the public hearing. So that's why we, when it's in line with the official community plan designation. So that's why we notify the public with the 2 consecutive newspaper ads and the landowner letters before first reading. The Local Government Act also notes to give notification for first reading. It has that language. And then we've also put that language into the procedures bylaw. If that is something that is confusing, it might be something that staff review with potential future amendments to the procedures bylaw. But we followed the Local Government Act wording for give notice of first reading, but that's council giving first reading, and then staff recommendation is, like you said, first, second, third, and adoption. Council always has the option to delegate public hearings and alternative options. So if that communication is confusing, that is something that we can look into providing more clarity on.
Councillor Orlando, follow.
Yeah, Your Worship, thank you. And thank you for the clarity, and thank you for the update as well on recent legislative changes that may have contributed to this. It is much appreciated. Just in general, for general comment, and the suggestion that it could possibly be amended for clarity in the future through the chair. For that reason, I feel that it would be challenging for me to proceed forward with straight through to final adoption when we are saying, this is before council for first reading. For those who may be paying attention closely on this, I think maybe in the future, if there's a way we could do it to provide clarity, I would be happy with that. But for the time being, that's challenging. So just a comment.
Further comment from council. Council Palmer and Council Lucero.
Mayor Souls, I'm prepared to put the motion that the zoning amendment bylaw number 2366 be read a first time, and I will have comments on that, but I'll put the motion on the table.
All right, so a seconder for that motion, Councillor Cherry. Further discussion on that motion, Councillor Palmer, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so, I wanted to get it on here because we're in the sort of debate zone, so. Further to Councillor Orlando's comments, I would not be comfortable proceeding past first reading for those reasons and other reasons tonight. The second point I'd like to make is in general, I'm in favor of this. And if I'm reading, understanding the intent behind the changes is to that the proponent has some possible customers to purchase and they need some changes, either in use or in floor area, or maybe a combination of both. I had a very specific question for a very specific reason that wasn't fully done. I'll do that outside of this time right now. But it really was with the intent, my understanding of the intention behind the application, whether there was another way, whether it was better or not, I guess it remains a question. That's just on that part. And then my final point is part of the reason I wouldn't be prepared to go past the first reading today on top of Councillor Orlando's comments is that there's been new comments that have been presented. I don't think there's been adequate knowledge in the community as to just on the communication side of this. Again, I'm generally in favor of the intention, but I think there needs to be an understanding by the community and for us when we dive in deeper. And then there was quite a few letters that were coming a little bit 11th hour here. And then one final comment with something like this, because there is quite a bit of implications of that we don't understand the full implications when it's these broad strokes. I will continue to favor a public hearing process. But that'll be for another time, assuming we only go to first reading today.
All right, Councillor Lucero, you have a comment on this motion?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Schultz. I just have a question to Ms. Hartland. When we're talking about grocery stores, is that kind of encompassed under local convenience stores? I just don't see it under the uses.
Ms. Hartland?
Yes, Your Worship, there's not a specific grocery store permitted use listed that detailed. It would be under retail store.
Okay, that would be under retail store, and that's in the definition that's attached to this?
Yes.
Yes, retail store is quite broad and general with what it includes.
Okay, and when we're talking about this and allowing them to knock down walls to expand units, is there any way that we can restrict how many walls they knock down and how many units they expand in this?
Through Your Worship, the Advisory Planning Commission also cited that they'd be supportive of up to 4 units being that size, as that's what the applicant was proposing without going through the whole zone. That is something that council could do, would be a maximum of the units, and it's just a more administrative staff could do it, but it would just be on business licensing, making sure that only 4 units are that floor area size, and making a note that it's capped once it's capped.
Okay. Yeah, I just see some issues with grocery store falling under that retail store and us allowing to expand retail stores. We could then end up kind of diluting downtown and what we're trying to not do is cannibalize town and allowing the larger retailers to get up into the space, to have more space than is available downtown will then put the pressure on RMR to build out their village more than they want to. And I think that has to be considered just in the whole scope of Mackenzie Village, RMR, and town.
Any further comment on the motion on the table? Councillor Steveners?
Maybe just a general comment is I'd like to maybe in future readings see a little bit more explanation in regards to the maximum setback requirements for the principal buildings, for the front interior side, and as written in the presentation. I just feel like there's a little lack of clarity, or maybe it's how I'm interpreting it, but there's certainly some implications that could be seen there.
Ms. Hartling, comments on maximum, minimum setback size?
Yeah, if council wishes, I can bring up the zone where it's cited. It is throughout the entire CD zone, to front, rear, sides have a maximum of, it varies from 3 meters, 6 meters, and 12 meters. So I can bring that up, but it's a removal of all max zones or max setbacks. So we didn't list them individually.
So I'm going to go to Mr. Simon next because he has his hand up. You want to weigh in on this?
Through your worship, just on the maximum setback question, there's no valid planning rationale to have a maximum setback. Staff are unaware why it was incorporated in the zone in the first place. And with every single phase of this development so far, it has had to be varied. And so this will help streamline the process and reduce administrative resources dedicated to variances for regulations that have no solid planning rationale as to why they're in the bylaw to begin with.
That answer your question, Councillor Steveners?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Good. Councillor Cherry, you have your hand up.
Thanks, Your Worship. Mr. Simon just answered
Okay.
that question.
Any other questions regarding Councillor Devlin?
Not so much a question, just a comment. I was sitting on the Advisory Planning Commission meeting, as you guys are all in Vancouver, with the exception of Councillor Orlando on that day. I'd just like to mention that while the APC as a whole did support this proposition, there was a lot of heated debate. The support wasn't unanimous, and it was kind of settled on that for a maximum of 4 units was what the APC as a whole, everybody would support in that. So just something to note when you're considering this, because yeah, that's obviously not going to be, that's very specific minute stuff, and it's not going to be. So.
And so, Ms. Hartling, when we're talking about these units, right now the units are set at 220 square meters maximum. Is that correct, or am I off with how they were built?
Through your worship, they're set at 200 square meters.
Thank you. And so basically they're asking for an amendment to 450 square meters, and that would be like 2 and a bit rather than 4. All right. So any other questions regarding this being read a first time? Councillor Cherry.
Thanks, Your Worship. I just want clarification. If we give this a first reading, will there still be acceptable time periods for the public to give feedback? Or have we already passed that?
No, there's going to be time for public to give feedback. Is that correct, Ms. Hartling?
Through your worship,
You have a public hearing?
there's only a public hearing if council delegates a public hearing.
All right, good. Councillor Palmer, you want to respond?
Yeah, so just further to Councillor Cherry's question, I'm prepared to make a motion that staff be prepared to have a public hearing for this application. It could either be after first reading or after second reading. I think staff could figure out all that, but that I think that's an important question, getting past first reading.
Okay, so we've got first reading on the table. Do you want to add comment if we weren't to go to public hearing? Do you want to make any comments on what's before you?
Sorry, can you?
So you were indicating that can the public give any more feedback? So if we don't go to public hearing, there is no more chance to give public feedback. Is that correct, Ms. Hartman?
Through your worship, if there is no public hearing, then yes, that's correct. There'd be no chance for any further public comments. They're on the front end of the application as the zoning text amendment is aligned with the official community plan. And just as per the changes of Local Government Act and the province for efficiency purposes, where it is consistent with the official community plan. We've done it at the front end where public has comments, council sees those comments, and if you do wish you would like to do a public hearing, and then you have that opportunity to do further public engagement with a public hearing, and then it's actually additional public consultation period if you do choose to do that. There is a council alternative option that's listed in the staff report should you wish to delegate a public hearing, and it's that zoning amendment bylaw 2366 be read a first time, be read a second time, and that a public hearing be scheduled for November 14th. If you wish to do that alternative option.
Councilor Orlando, you have a comment?
Yeah, just a clarification question on that. Sorry, I wasn't understanding right at the start there. So if we proceed to first reading right now, and this is due to recent legislative changes, if we proceed to just first reading and do not schedule a public hearing, then opportunities for public comment are ceased or done. And I'm just trying to understand how that is in terms of technicality of that. Am I wrong, or is that correct?
Through your worship, if you just give first reading now, there's option of giving second reading, and you still would have to delegate a public hearing. So if you're giving staff the direction of doing first reading and then coming back with second and recommendation of a public hearing, you can do public hearing after first reading. It's just council would be directing staff if that's what council wishes.
So in answer to your question, if we don't give direction to go to public hearing, input from community members ceases.
Your worship, yeah, oh, sorry.
Sorry, through your worship, yeah, if you give it first, second, and then a third reading, there's no option for a public hearing. You would have to do an second as amended and delegate a public hearing. So you're either giving, if I'm understanding it correctly, you're looking to give it first reading, but there would need to be some sort of direction to staff of what we're coming back with the council. If there's amendments to the bylaw, or if we're giving it first, second, and delegating a public hearing, staff would request more direction with that, an alternative recommendation and resolution.
Mr. Simon.
Thank you, Your Worship. Again, just to clarify, the public provided comments after the notification, both in the newspaper and through landowner notifications of first reading, as per the Local Government Act requirements. Council is now in the driver's seat and gets to decide how this amending bylaw goes through the process. Staff recommendation is it's consistent with the OCP, so we carry on with readings of the bylaw. We've done our proper notice as per the LGA. If council feels that appropriate public engagement is required or additional public engagement is required, whether that be through a public information meeting hosted by the developer, whether that be through a public hearing formal process, then that's up to council to give us that direction today. If council wants to go with a public hearing, you can hold a public hearing anytime between first and third reading, but we'd be looking for that direction from council today on how you guys wish to proceed with this particular application.
All right, good. Appreciate that. Any further, Councilor Orlando, you have one more comment?
Your worship, yeah. So just by way of making a general comment of how I'm approaching this, I understand the province's intent with changes to legislation, particularly focused on building housing to streamline the process, and I'm fully supportive of that, and I'm supportive of streamlining the process in general. Primarily, though, this is not a housing application. This is about retail space, and I think, as I mentioned before, the wording of the notice saying, "Hey, first reading is happening on this day." If I received that letter, I would. There, you've got first reading on the table that day, and then we're going to see what happens. Maybe go watch the video, find out what's going on. So for me to be cut off at that point and be like, "Whoa, there's legislative change, I didn't know, not know that," I think that will bring unfortunate consequences to the people at the table, especially mayor and council. So I can support that. I don't necessarily know if I would support going to a full public hearing on this. I do want to air it out, especially in light of you know, the fact that there is just one, you know, there would be the opportunity to comment would cease if we went to this. And so it seems to me, unless I'm mistaken, that proceeding to first reading would, with direction to staff to provide options for a process, including public hearing, would be the only choice. Secondly, I mean, just generally speaking, you know, I've council received an email from the Chamber of Commerce, sort of asking if they, you know, not expressing an opinion, but looking for questions or support. People have raised concerns, and there's also, for example, Councilor Lucia raised concerns about, you know, the mix of retail, the future of retail, pressures that might be placed on competitors to move forward, change the nature of the community, including the downtown core. I have sat in public hearings on this development over the years in the past, including ones with 700 people-ish in a, you know, maybe that's an overstatement, 500 people in the gymnasium on a heated debate, and it is something that is close to people's hearts. And I think, you know, if I look even at, you know, documents such as the code of conduct that we've studied, it talks about, you know, listening to people and hearing them. And I think on a technicality to suddenly, you know, say, no, you're cut off and we're done, I think you're going to feel the heat for that. And I don't see any reason why we would not at least slow it down and allow people to have comment. Councillor Devlin commented that there was a division at the APC about this. I was not there. I do not know what that was, including the nature of how many units would be allowable. The answer from staff seems to be that as many as would be allowed, because it's a blanket change based on square footage allowances. So it could be a significant change. And then specifically, one of the details that I think is important is what is included when you're dealing with text amendments, is what is included on that list. You know, is it, you know, a restaurant? Is it retail? What kind of retail? What are the definitions of those? Are we all super watertight on what all those are? And what that means. So for example, liquor control and licensing branch has a 1 kilometer exclusion zone per license in the city. I believe it's 1 kilometer zone. So really that creates a race to maximum square footage, for example, and those things. I don't even know if that includes cannabis stores or licenses as well. I would assume, I mean, that just mentions liquor there, but I believe the actual name of the provincial organization is LRC. Yeah. Cannabis is in there. It's not in here on the documentation. And also I was confused because partially I was relying on some of the documentations provided by the proponent, which have been attached here. And they mentioned that the original maximum size was 250 square meters. Is that correct, or was it 200 square meters? For example, it's been said several times it's 200, but now it's 250. So, you know, reliance on those documents to cross-reference, for example, allowed usage also caused me confusion. So I think we should air it out in my support, I guess. And I don't know if Councillor Palmer, who made the original motion, would like to present a revision, but that would be to present first reading and potentially ask staff to present an option for second reading and public hearing, or is that already encapsulated in your? Let's
go with the first reading is on here. You made that motion. You want to speak to the first motion?
Yeah, I'll speak to the first motion.
Right.
So just for clarification of my mindset on this, I'm on the sequence of these motions. So first reading, getting this on the table so we can proceed with the intent of public engagement. So basically a modified option 2. So not going to the second reading after this, but going specifically with the staff recommendation that a public hearing be scheduled on November 14th, coming right after this motion. And as the planner indicated, that public hearing can happen any time between the first and third reading. So whether it's after first or second is kind of a mute point. I think it's slightly better actually in the first, after the first, but anyway, so that's where my intention. I'll be supportive of the motion to go to first reading. Again, generally in support of the intention, and then I'm willing to put the motion after if this is adopted to.
Good, thank you for that. Any other comments on first reading? Councillor Orlando.
Just a clarification question. Are you signaling your intent after the first reading passes to present another motion to that staff present an option for a public hearing or a
Yes.
set date for a public hearing?
I'm actually going to go with the staff recommendation that a public hearing be scheduled on November 14th, 2023 for the zoning amendment bylaw 2366. And the intent is this allows full public engagement up to and including November 14th. And there might be some other direction to staff in addition to that. Yeah.
Good. All right. So the motion on the table is go to first reading. Councillor Cherry, you want to make comment?
Thanks, Your Worship. I'm looking for some clarification. If we give this first reading, then we're unable to amend that to align with the Advisory Planning Commission's resolution at a future date, where they wanted to restrict or only allow a maximum of 4 units.
So here's the thing. First reading is to go to a maximum of 450 square meters, which is less than the maximum 4 units that APC was asking for. We're being told that this unit is 200 square meters and going to 4 of them, that's 800 square meters. Is that not correct, Ms. Hartling?
Through your worship, is Councillor Cherry mentioning the max number on the 450 or? So currently it's 200 square meters that's permitted. The request is 450 for both those sub areas. I'm not sure if Councillor Cherry is looking at council option where it's zoning amendment be read a first time.
I want to go back, Ms. Hartling. So the question is, APC said that they were willing to allow, they had voted to say up to a maximum of 4 units being put together. Is that correct?
Sorry for clarification, the APC was suggesting that 4 units get the maximum 450 square meters and the rest be limited to the 200.
Okay, now I'm
Square
understanding. Thank you for
So
that
my
clarification.
curiosity is, if we give this first reading, are we able to amend that later?
So if I may, actually, it's probably for the corporate officer, but after first reading, I guess the question for the corporate officer, can amendments be made to the bylaw, these changes after first reading, after public hearing even?
Through your worship to Councillor Cherry and Palmer, yes. Basically, the first reading is to introduce the bylaw.
Okay, cool.
And so we can alter that.
Thanks, I appreciate that. Then that was my main
That was your
question.
concern? All right. All right, any further questions regarding going to first reading? And I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? No, motion's carried. Now, Councillor Palmer, you have subsequent.
I move that a public hearing be scheduled on November 14th, 2023 for zoning amendment bylaw number 2366.
Okay, second for that motion, Councillor Lucelle. Any further discussion on this motion? Councillor Palmer, you want to speak to it? Then I'll go to
Yeah, I'll speak to
Councillor
it
Orlando.
briefly. So just further, especially in response to Councillor Orlando, the need of public engagement on this is ultimately important. And also further to Councillor Orlando's comments regarding the Chamber of Commerce, I believe has offered to go to their members for input.
Right.
And I would, that could possibly be a follow-up motion that we accept their offer. I think that would be helpful.
Councillor Orlando.
Your worship, I was mostly asking, through the chair, mostly asking clarification questions that Councillor Palmer has now clarified. A further comment or question would be, how would staff interpret this in terms of second reading? And furthermore, the public engagement, level of public engagement, who is driving the public engagement, how it will work. Is that something that staff wants direction on as well, or has an idea of how to proceed with based on just scheduling the public hearing? And if need be, I'm happy to add that to the motion before.
Mr. Simon, comment.
Through your worship to Councillor Orlando, if additional engagement is requested from council, it would be my recommendation that council do that only through a formal public hearing process. Anything above and beyond is going to take staff time to do, and then we're using staff time for a private developer application and staff resources for a private developer application. So again, in my view, two options. Council wants additional engagement through the public hearing process and direct that a public hearing be scheduled, or give it first reading and direct that the proponent do a public information meeting, which would be in accordance with our development approval procedures bylaw.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table to go to public hearing, and people can engage that way. We can reach out to chamber, whoever, to give input if they want to. And we can also reach out to the community saying, hey, we have a public hearing. If you have further comments, then make it known to council. Councilor Palmer.
So just a question, Mayor. So it's not in my calendar, but do we have a council meeting on the 14th?
Ms. Floyd, we do not, do we?
No, I don't believe we do.
Or
I
the
believe
week
it's
before?
wow.
Just can't see it in the, I just wondering when the second reading might actually possibly occur. Do we have a meeting in November?
We do, yes.
And 14th is the second page.
I believe it's the 14th.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Mayor Souls, assuming that's the case and we have the public hearing, we may elect to do second reading on that meeting.
We can, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we have the,
That's up to council at that time.
Yeah.
We can do that.
yeah, so we can get a clarification at that time.
Yeah. All right. So Councilor Orlando, you have further comment on this motion?
Sure, yeah. Regarding the process moving forward, so if it was left to the public hearing as the vehicle for engaging the public, the process for that would be advertising in the newspaper, and is that it, or what other things? And then the second part of that question is regarding the Chamber of Commerce's generous offer to engage. That sounds a bit like staff engaging in time, which I'm not opposed to. I think when we make these decisions, we're considering everyone's property rights and everyone's other rights and everyone's taxation rights. For example, the city went into extensive debt they went into debt to finance, for example, traffic safety improvements around this area. It does concern other people, so I'm wondering how is that going to happen with the chamber? Is someone going to set a letter, and does that need to be prescribed here to staff, or how is that process going to unfold?
Ms. Floyd.
So your worship, through to Councillor Orlando, typically the public hearing process is an ad in the paper and then letters to the 100-meter radius.
Mhm.
We don't try to do any additional advertising because it's developer specific. If it was a city project, we could push it out on Facebook and all of that.
Mhm.
But I think that the chamber usually, when there's something like this, they provide input anyways.
Mhm.
So I don't think we need a specific recommendation. However, if you want one, you could put that on the table as well.
Thank you, and through the chair, just a follow-up regarding like the email newsletter that the city produces. So the city's not in a policy right now of advising people of public hearing through that tool.
As of right now, no.
Okay, Councilor Palmer.
Thank you, Mayor Souls. I think Councilor Orlando is making some very valid points and points that you have made in the past regarding public engagement in the tools, and that this antiquated process of the advertising in the paper isn't fulfilling societal needs for communications, if I'm interpreting what Councilor Orlando is in general.
And sometimes the negative ramifications of that falls on our lap, which is why I put it as an issue.
Exactly. I think that's a topic that we should bring back, and certainly the whole communications thing. I did it at UBCM. I attended a session on I forget what it was reinventing the public engagement process.
Mhm.
And there's a bunch of layers there, but and I'll try to avoid diving deeper in that right now, but I think that is a conversation in the future. But in the meantime, I think probably we're kind of stuck in this narrow lane.
Yeah, I agree, especially with legislation. All right, any further comments on the public hearing, Councillor Devlin?
A quick one from a policy view through the chair. I'll just state in advance, I'm actually in support of a public hearing. Mackenzie Village is a very hot button issue among locals, so I think more public engagement specifically around developer-led things up there is not bad. So I'm in support of that, but just from a policy point of view through the chair to Ms. Floyd, were somebody to want to go directly to adoption, we would shoot down this and then put forth a motion for second reading and then for third. Just out of curiosity.
That is correct, Councillor Devlin.
Perfect, just checking.
All right, any other comments on public hearing? Councillor Orlando, one last time.
Your worship, yes, I was through the chair. Could you read out the dates one more time? Because we were talking about a few dates there. I wasn't too sure.
November
I read the
14th.
resolution one more time?
Yeah, so that is directly out of the staff recommendation option 2, omitting the second reading at this time, that a public hearing be scheduled on November 14th, 2023 for zoning amendment bylaw 2366.
Okay, thank you.
All right, one last time, any further comment on public hearing? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? No, motion's carried unanimously. All right, we're gonna move on to item number C, zoning bylaw amendment application zone 2022 007 1679 Arrow Drive. And Ms. Hartling, do you have a presentation on this?
Your worship, yes, I do. I'll just share my screen here. And for council's information, the applicant, owner, and attendance today. So the application in front of council is a rezoning application, and it's a split zone map amendment. So it's to rezone an existing mobile home zone R5 to a proposed medium density multifamily residential zone, the R3 zone, and then also a single family zone R1. And this is under file zone 2022-007, and the subject property is 1679 Arrow Drive. So similar to last presentation, I'll go over the background details of the subject property, proposal overview, policy direction, staff evaluation, and then staff recommendation and council discussion. You'll see in the image in front of you, the subject property, 1679 Arrow Drive. This property is developed as a manufactured home park. It is called Crescent Trailer Park, and this park allows up to 15 mobile homes in the originally approved subdivision plan. The property currently contains a single family dwelling caretaker's residence that's under construction. This is formerly pad 1. And at the front of the property abutting Arrow Drive, you can see in the image there, this is 2023 imagery. And the property currently also contains 3 mobile homes. Those are pads 5, 6, and 11. And then the remaining land is vacant. So the property is accessed off of Arrow Drive. It contains some steep slopes in the middle of the property at the end of the road there. And it also is within the environmental sensitive development permit area, environmental hazardous area, multifamily residential and mixed use development permit area. The property is serviced by community water, and it currently has 8 septic systems installed on it for the mobile homes. And this is proposed to be decommissioned by the owner to be serviced by sewer. There is no sewer to the subject property, and the owner is proposing to install a sewer line from Airport Way all along Arrow Drive to the subject property. The property is within Arrow Heights, the neighborhood, and surrounded by single-family dwelling lots along Arrow Drive to the north and also to the west. You'll see 1669 is a single-family dwelling. And then you have Moose Park also to the west along Arrow Drive. You have the Arrow Heights Elementary School to the southwest, and then the Mackenzie Village development to the east and southeast that are currently the future phases of Mackenzie Village projects and vacant at this time. The property is zoned R5, designated low density residential in the official community plan bylaw. So the request in front of you today, you'll see a map on the right hand corner with a split zoning. So the front of the property we rezoned from R5 to R1, and then the remaining lands be rezoned from R5 to R3. So the R3 zone allows 30 dwelling units per hectare within this zone, and the portion of the subject property is approximately 1.13 hectares. So the size of property, not taking into consideration any site restrictions, would allow up to 34 dwelling units for that size of property under the R3 zone. The owner is proposing between 26 to 30 dwelling units, and this is primarily due to topography, an internal common road system, parking, landscaping, and usable open space for the units. The existing single family dwelling is proposed to be subdivided off. Just at the front there, you'll see in the side image, the landscape plan. The house is at the front with a duplex and proposed fourplexes. This could change. However, we do have a development permit that has been submitted with this layout, which would, if council is supportive of the rezoning, would come to council for a future date with the specific development context, landscaping, and forming character of the multifamily units within the strata. And the remaining land is proposed to be a strata development with the internal strata road that you can see in that image. And the two images below that are an example of the duplex and fourplexes that are proposed, and these are within the submitted development permit plans that the applicant has submitted to staff. So the remaining mobile home pads are to receive notification that follow the Provincial Residential Tenancy Act. So that's for mobile homes that are owner owned and rented by tenants, and then also the Manufactured Home Park Tenancy Act. And so those are mobile homes that are owned by the tenants themselves, and they lease the space for the pad or the mobile home. So in accordance with the currently adopted, council adopted policy, is DS 24 policy, and specifically with section 4.2H of the OCP, staff do recommend that council considers an amenity contribution of $20,000 per manufactured home based on the 15 manufactured homes being permitted within the Crescent Mobile Home Park. So $300,000 into the city's affordable housing reserve. This is a negotiation aspect as part of rezoning. So council does have discretion over this. You'll see on the right-hand side, this is the plan that was the original subdivision plan for the manufactured home park, and this is what staff are going off of for the number of units permitted within the park. The owner does agree with the contribution of $20,000 per manufactured home. However, they've proposed amended request into the city's affordable housing reserve based on 13 units, as 2 units have always been used as for septic systems for the pads. So this is also up to council's discretion. And you'll see the staff recommendation later on in this report with the amenity contribution. So getting into the OCP policy review for this rezoning application, we're looking at the low density residential land use designation, the Arrow Heights neighborhood plans and housing policies for the area. So the development proposal of one single family dwelling with a mixture of duplex fourplexes is consistent with the land designation, compatible and complementary to the surrounding neighborhood and development forms with how it's been proposed and laid out. The development of the single family dwelling is located at the front of the lands closest to the residential other single family dwellings, where the proposed multi-unit building strata is further back and abutting the Mackenzie lands that has similar development forms. The proposal provides for a diversity of housing forms, utilize a large parcel to appropriately site and develop a mix of single family duplex fourplex housing. Future development in this area will require improvements of a multi-use path at the property's frontage. This is outlined in the transportation master plan, which engineering department will require to be secured with the subdivision. If the proposed rezoning is supported by council, then the owner has submitted the form and character development permit for future consideration that outlines landscaping and natural preserved areas of the property. This is an item in Arrow Heights neighborhood to be looked at. The owner has proposed to extend the sanitary services. This is all along the way, as mentioned, from Arrow Way all the way to Arrow Drive, which would provide an extension to many residents within the neighborhood. For housing, the proposal includes a variety of housing topologies, as mentioned, so only 3% single detached, with 97% dwelling units to be a mixture of multi-unit ground-oriented dwellings. The subject lands have 3 remaining manufactured homes and pads that must receive notification for the relocation or removal that's consistent with provincial legislation. Staff understand that the owner and the tenant of the tenant-owned mobile home are reviewing tenancy timing and process, and this is all under the authority of the residential tenancy branch. The owner has agreed to provide amenity contribution, and this is to be decided by council if this is what council wishes the owner to enter into. So for public notification, so staff have advertised as per the Local Government Act requirements. We advertised first reading consideration September 28th and October 5th editions of the Revelstoke Review, and 19 properties are captured in the 100-meter notification area. We have received 6 public submission letters after the staff report was written, and these have been attached to the council agenda for your consideration as well. So the staff recommendation in front of council today is that the zoning bylaw amendment be read a first time, second, and third time, and that prior to adoption of the zoning bylaw, that council consider the following condition. So in accordance with official community plan bylaw and the DS 24 policy, the owner shall register on title a section 219 amenity contribution covenant. The covenant shall require the owner to pay an amenity contribution into the city's affordable housing reserve of $20,000 per manufactured home, based upon the total number of 15 manufactured homes permitted within the original Crescent Mobile Home Park. This is to be paid prior to the owner, before the owner starts the construction of any building for any multifamily residential development on the land. Thank you. That's my presentation. If you have any questions, please let me know. And if you have any specific questions to the owner or agent, they are also in attendance. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Harling. Just one question from me regarding this. So there's still 3 or 4 manufactured homes on the property. They will be given notice. How much time do they have when under the Residential Tenancy Act to vacate the property?
Under the Residential Tenancy Act, for a tenant rented unit is 4 months. For if a mobile home park is looking to redevelop, there's other legislative requirements for notification for other reasons. So the owner has outlined their notification that they've given the tenants and the reasons why. So there's other parameters. If it's notification specifically for redevelopment, it's 4 months notice. And then if it's specifically for redevelopment for a manufactured home that's owned, it's 12 months notice.
Okay, so have these notices been given to the homeowners at this point?
Through your worship, the landowner has provided notice. Those are being reviewed currently with the residential tenancy branch, the owner and the tenants. And there are more details other than just a redevelopment notice that have happened with those units. If you have more questions, the owner and agent are in attendance. There is quite the submitted overview of every notification for every single pad within the council package. But yes, they have to follow the provincial legislation for notification.
Councilor Stigner.
Yeah, I just wanted to maybe make the point that in regards to the mobile home park, we should be referencing the Manufactured Home Park Tenancy Act, not the Residential Tenancy Act. I'm not sure if there's a difference in timeline notifications, but maybe just for clarification that we're referencing the correct document. Thank you.
All right, so Ms. Hartling, comment?
Through your worship, both acts actually do apply. The difference is if one unit is rented, but the owner owns, like the subject property owner owns the manufactured home and rents it, the Residential Tenancy Act applies to that one unit, which is the case for one of these units. And then if a tenant owns a manufactured home and is leasing their owned home on a leased pad, then the Manufactured Home Park Tenancy Act applies. And that's why staff have also presented and council's adopted that tenancy policy, specifically with notification requirements for if it's a tenant rented or tenant owned unit. So they both do apply.
Follow up, Council.
No, thank you for that clarification. I appreciate it.
All right, so Council Palmer, you have a comment?
Yeah, so just questions, Mayor Souls, to the planner regarding connectivity. So the paths, we got Arrow Heights School, and there's reference in here, but it's not, and I think maybe you caught it and I didn't catch everything. And then Mackenzie Village are basically right in that same area. So will the development, or is it unclear, create connectivity to Mackenzie Village into that back end? And then also, is it feasible down to Arrow School, Heights School, directly? I think that would have to go through the Mackenzie Village lands in order to do that. And then just maybe to put some context, which is in front of us, but Mackenzie Village does have long-term plans for paths or trails or connecting to budding neighborhoods, if I recall correctly.
Sure. Ms. Harlan, comment?
Yeah, through your worship, the trail connectivity is a discussion with staff and the applicant, and we will contact neighboring property owners. It's under the development permit that we were reviewing that under. The frontage improvements on Arrow Drive, that's where Mackenzie Village's trails connect into, and it would be along a multi-use path along Arrow Drive and around. Staff are applying to have discussions with the school board if they are in consideration of a trail. I know that there are some concerns with SEPTED for going from the rear of the property through there without lighting through a school area. They do have concerns with trails leading in past the school there and not around the lighted sidewalks. So there is discussion of the trails, and if that is a suitable area, it hasn't been decided or a recommendation by staff at this time, but it is a current discussion that the Advisory Planning Commission and Engineering Department have brought up for discussions under the development permit. So that's something that haven't been brought forward with the rezoning, but that we are in discussions about a potential trail if it is a suitable area.
I appreciate that. Mr. Black, comment? There's going to be some sort of a MUP along the front going to the school, or that's the intention, is that correct?
Through your worship to all of council, the transportation master plan has a sidewalk on Park Drive.
Right.
And because of the traffic volumes on Arrow Drive, it is proposed in the TMP to have an on-street path. So it would be a painted pedestrian way with priority for active transportation. And again, it's only because of the volumes and the costs to put sidewalks in the community, and O&M and snow plowing is something that we don't believe is fundable in the long term for the community. And so sharing infrastructure with cars is the best way to proceed where we know the volumes are relatively low. And this is the case on Arrow Drive.
All right, good, appreciate that. All right, so Mr. Gregg and your representative, if you'd like to come up to the podium here, please. I have a couple questions for you regarding the proposal. Thanks for your time. Thanks for being here today. So we're talking about your formal notification to your existing tenants. Has that already gone out? what's the timeline for them as far as needing to be off of the property? And then when are you planning, if we pass this, when are you planning to start to construct?
So Mayor, thank you for that, this speaking. I understand this protocol typically. And good afternoon, Council. As Planner Eric Hartling indicated, there's 3 pads. One pad is being occupied by the owner's son, so he knows when the time comes and his house is built elsewhere in town that he'll be moving over at some point in the future. So that's not a question. The other 2 tenants, one is owner occupied tenant and one is just a tenant, as was alluded to earlier. So there are 2 different acts that apply depending on the pad we're talking about. In the case of pad 6, there's 2 notices that have currently been presented and delivered to the occupants. That was done through legal counsel. So my client has made the decision a couple of months ago that it's best to not to have any missteps along the way, is to bring in legal counsel to serve the notices and receive notices accordingly. One of the notices we're dealing with is a lack of rent being paid in the last 6 months. So that is outside of any future development plans, just simply lack of paying of rent that's owing. And it's a quite a small amount considering the scheme of things, but still owing. And then with the other pad.
Point of order. Your worship, these types of presentations are not conventional, as was alluded to by the speaker. Right now, we're being presented with new information in the middle of a process that could be has multiple options in front of us. I don't have any evidence before me as to whether rent was or was not paid by who at what residence. So I want to express my discomfort. Also, in reading the comments that have been submitted by members of the public, it's apparent to me that there is an ongoing legal dispute that's before the tenancy branch and a lot of things that are going on here. I feel that from my perspective, when we're introducing dialogue to the public, which has extraordinary legal provisions in terms of reporting out to the public, because it is a matter of public dialogue in a public chamber, that we be exceptionally careful in the context of ongoing disputes between third parties, that we have the information presented to us and put on the public record, be vetted before it is here. So again, no idea before or against it. Your worship, I'm not finished. Before or against this. So that is a concern to me. So I don't know how to proceed. I would defer to staff for advice with this, but to be cautious. I mean, in the format of libel and slander, we are the broadcaster of this. And that bears liability on the city of Revelstoke and all of the taxpayers who are liable for that. So I do have concerns. So I would like to register my concern publicly right now.
Great. Mr. Simon, comment?
Through your worship to all of council, just to help clarify the process that's before council today, this is a proposed rezoning application. Any legal issues between tenants and the existing owner or perceived legal issues from anyone that's involved, nothing to do with the city. We are not the administrators or the arbitrators of the Residential Tenancy Act, nor the Manufactured Home Park Tenancy Act. What I would recommend to council is that your focus on this particular application has to do with use and density. Is the use that's proposed through the rezoning and the density that's proposed through the rezoning suitable for this area? That is the question before council today. Any specific details about owners of mobile homes and renters of mobile homes and whether or not the provisions of the RTA or the Manufactured Home Park Residential Tenancy Act are being followed, that is up to the province to administer that process. And it is not something that the city is involved in. So again, I would just urge council to keep the discussion today really focused on use and density through this rezoning application.
Thank you, Mr. Simon. I appreciate that. And I will rescind my questions. Thank you, sir. I apologize. I didn't want to go down a path that was going to cause difficulty for members of this council or this community. Councillor Palmer, do you have comments or questions? We have the proponent here. Is there any questions that regarding the motions that are going to be put on the table that you would like to ask? Otherwise, I'll ask the gentleman to be seated and we can proceed.
Yeah, just proceed. Thank you.
All right. So, gentlemen, thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. Now, does someone want to put this motion on the table? Councillor Devlin.
Zoning amendment bylaw number 2365, you're the first time.
Second for the motion, please.
For discussion, I'll put.
Okay, Councillor Palmer is moving that forward, and for discussion, Councillor Palmer, do you have comments?
Yeah, so for first reading, I'm supportive. Again, I think we're having a little bit of deja vu from the previous discussion on need of public engagement. I do note there's a number of late comments, including stuff that isn't relevant to our decision making that Councillor Orlando just alluded to. And so further to Mr. Simon's comments, just looking at the merits of this application. So I think really we're saying, okay, should we proceed? And then I think the question is coming up again, how much public engagement? So there's so I'm supportive for the first reading and look forward to seeing how this pans out.
All right, good. Councillor Stapleton and Councillor Lucy.
Thank you, Mayor Souza. I appreciate it. I was just going to ask, and I don't mean to put Councillor Cherry on the spot. If this came in front of the APC, what was the APC's recommendation?
Thank you. I believe you came in front, you were with me sitting there at the APC that meeting, potentially. This wasn't for the APC, but we were all at UBCM. I did ask Councillor Devlin to attend for me if he wants to jump in.
Right.
I was listening.
Yeah, I can.
Go ahead, Councillor Devlin.
Through the chair to Councillor Stapenhurst. The APC is generally in supportive of it. It is a higher density, increased density, infill density. I believe there's a couple comments in the back of the report, but just to summarize, there was some conversations around sidewalks, lighting improvement of the area, which would be potentially necessary if this became a higher density neighborhood, which would be taxation funded, but that's a conversation for later down the road. The sewer extension was, I believe, planned to be developer paid, so that's a benefit to Arrow Heights as a neighborhood. Yeah, it was generally supported. There wasn't a lot of debate on this one. It was kind of just those concerns were brought up. The questions were brought up to staff. Staff clarified that some things are infrastructure and on the city, and some things can be developer paid, and then everybody was kind of on board with it. So it seemed but there was no conversations around tenancy acts, mobile or otherwise. There was, yeah, it was just considered an infill density bonus kind of thing by them.
Okay, Councillor Stapleton's follow.
Yeah, just two questions for follow-up, and maybe the first question to the members from the planning department is whether or not R4 would not be a more suitable use of this land. And then my second question would be to Director Black, and that's regards to city services for this lot, if it was approved for trash collection purposes, snow removal, water metering, etc. What would be the plan moving forward?
Okay, let's go, first of all, regarding the zoning, Ms. Hartling, would you want to weigh in on that? There's a reason that staff picked these zones, and so comment, please.
Through your worship, as this is an applicant-based application, they've proposed the R3 zone for the development form that they're looking to pursue and develop. So staff do review the rezoning application based on the zone the applicant has proposed. We do make comments if there is potentially more applicable zone that staff are supportive of. However, R4 zone, the way it's crafted right now, doesn't permit uses that have allowances that aren't necessarily consistent with the low density residential designation. So the R3, with how the zone is crafted currently, is the most in line with the low density residential designation that allows for ground built multifamily housing that's in the form of fourplexes, duplexes. And then once you get to those apartment houses, that's where you're going up to a medium density designation currently. So this currently, how the zones are drafted, would be an R3 zone.
Should not. And so I'm going to go, Mr. Black, you're going to weigh in. Can you weigh in?
Thank you, Your Worship. As this project is being proposed as a strata project, all public services would be to the strata board. So snow removal, water, sewer services would all be paid by the strata. Snow removal and all stratas at this time, especially a unit like this would likely have a commercial waste disposal company attached to it. We haven't gotten that far in the discussion as far as waste management goes, but utilities would be strata.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for your question. Councillor Palmer, then Councillor Chair.
Question, actually, just a comment first regarding Ms. Harleen's report. So it's a good report, and I like the consistency and the options. So thank you very much for your reports and a lot of details. And yet, it's other than volume, it's easy to follow. So thank you for that. A question regarding the R1 portion. It seems to me that, well, I guess it's more of a question. If the whole thing was zoned R3, would that house that's being built right now be conforming to an R3 designation?
Yeah, through your worship, I believe the R3, I can just check, does allow for single family dwellings. However, the development form of a building strata would not be permitted. So it's because of the subdivision style the applicant's proposing to have a building strata does not include a single family home. So they wouldn't be part of that strata development. So in order to subdivide off that single family dwelling, it does have to have an R1 zone to maintain it as a single family dwelling in that size.
Okay, then for clarity, that house will not be part of the strata. That will be facing onto the other road and receive city services then.
Yes, through your worship, yes, that will be its own single family dwelling zone lot, similar to the other properties on Arrow Drive.
Thank you.
Councillor Lando.
Your worship, a question for staff. The proposal under section 3 here, or agreement, proposes $20,000 of affordable housing reserve funding, 20 for each unit, calculated at 15 units for the 15 units, so 20,000 times 15. My question for staff is, recently the city has proposed some changes, is working on them. Those, as far as I understand, have not been enacted. So we would be relying on existing and current policies. And I'm wondering what those are for this, what the current city policy is for in the case here, such as things like rights of first refusal or rental supports or whatever. I'm just seeking clarity on options regarding that specific part of the agreement.
Ms. Harley?
Yeah, through your worship, so staff have reviewed the DS24 policy that council adopted. It's the manufactured home park redevelopment residential tenant protection strata conversion policy. So we've combined some policies into one and updated it. So there is different options for redevelopment of mobile home parks, for contribution to the city's housing reserve or first right of refusal, where the development form may allow for that. This development is looking at multifamily building strata, staff and the applicant have been discussions about an amenity contribution into the city's housing reserve to provide for each of the 15 units as an option for the city to then pursue an affordable housing option project. So they have agreed to the 20,000 per manufactured home, which is an option within that policy that's council adopted. There's basically 3 options of stratifying an existing manufactured home park, the first right of refusal, or a tenant rental tenure only zone, if that's something that the developer is looking at, or the amenity contribution.
Follow-up, Council?
Your worship, thank you. Yeah, just I guess a point of clarity on with the focus, $20,000 affordable housing reserve is great for future affordable housing projects and initiatives. In terms of taking a lens for provision for existing tenants or residents in the area, what is provided and how do staff go about making those decisions based on policy to get it to this point? And further to that, are there other options available that if council so choose at this point, they could set forth in accordance with the policy that does exist?
Ms. Hartling, or Mr. Simon, you have your hand up.
Through your worship, I just wanted to clarify that right of first refusal is still required under the Manufactured Home Park Tenancy Act for any existing tenants. And in this particular case, with respect to the policy that was recently adopted by council, that does outline 3 options, as Ms. Hartling indicated. Stratification is not feasible due to the size of the lands and the amount of units that could be supported and the cost for extending sewer to the subject property. You need higher density to accommodate those offsite improvement costs that are required to enable the development, and therefore a contribution into the Affordable Housing Reserve that can then be used in accordance with the recent policy that council adopted to delineate how those funds get distributed to nonprofit housing providers in the community, which is desperately needed right now. We need more funds to actually be able to dish out to our nonprofit housing providers to see more housing constructed on municipal owned lands, which is why you're seeing the recommendation from staff today that this goes forward, and that as an amenity contribution, it goes into the Affordable Housing Reserve.
All right, Councilor Chair.
Thanks, Your Worship. I just want to say that I'm in favor of the applicant having to pay $20,000 per manufactured home based upon the 15 manufactured homes. I think that that $300,000 is only a drop in the bucket compared to what these tenants have gone through over the last, I think, almost decade by this developer. There's been multiple news articles written about them. I think everybody here is familiar about this application and what's been happening over the last decade.
Good. All right, thank you. Councilor Orlando, did you have follow-up? Sorry, you had your hand up when I went to Councilor Chair.
Oh, okay. Your worship, thank you. Yeah, so just following up on the staff comment. Staff considers options available on a case-by-case basis, depending on what's in front of them with the, the size of the property, how many things are there, and then recommends a path coming forward to this point. And I guess for further clarification, right of first refusal is, as you mentioned, contained within provincial legislation. There is no provision for that at the current stage, or other provisions for other supports for people who are displaced, such as assistance, or I guess in the past, recent past, we've some reports have presented that option. I'm just trying to understand where we stand now on that, I guess, through the chair. Thank you.
Comment, Ms. Hartling?
Through your worship, the owner can have the option, if they want to, give the first right of refusal as outlined under the Tenancy Act, and that's something that they can provide in their proposal summary. The first right of refusal is an option, but it is through the provincial residential tenancy branch as the option. So we currently have looked at the options of stratifying a park, pursuing residential tenure only zoning, and then the third option is this, providing 25% of the new units of non-market rental through redevelopment of the site with existing tenants getting first right of refusal. So if that is something, the first right of refusal would be for one tenant of the park. If that is something that Mr. Simon can weigh in if he would like, but that's something that is not outlined in the proposal at this time.
Through your worship, just to add on to that, I don't think that the city should be stepping in to enforce the provincial requirements. There's already a requirement as well, if you own a mobile home on site, that you provide $20,000 in compensation to that individual under the Manufactured Home Park Tenancy Act. This application came in before council had adopted the current policy. So the current policy really focuses on early notification and preparing tenant relocation packages before an application is submitted. Obviously, because that policy was not enforced when the application was submitted, those provisions of the policy are not applicable. And so staff were working to determine, since this process was already 2/3 of the way through after the policy came into effect, what was the most prudent path forward for this particular development. And also given the current nature of the park, that it is developed with 4 of 15 units out there, and many of which already have agreements to pursue and in tenancy. So that's where we got to the recommendation of a cash in lieu contribution into the Affordable Housing Reserve.
Your worship, just for clarity, yeah, thank you, Director Simon, Mr. Simon. I do appreciate the clarity there, and that was what was causing me confusion, was that this application was received prior to recent changes. So I do appreciate it.
All right, Councillor Cherry.
Thanks, Your Worship. I just want to ask a question, and maybe staff could help out here. I don't quite know who would be the one. Why is notification given to tenants of a mobile home park prior to an application being adopted? Redevelopment.
Mr.
Not
Simon.
at time of application versus at time of
So,
adoption.
through your worship, just so I'm understanding correctly, and again, I want to make clear that the application today came in before the current mobile home park policy. So if I'm understanding correctly, you're asking about a hypothetical situation where we would ask for that if someone wants to come in tomorrow and say, I want to redevelop a mobile home park, what process do I need to go through?
Actually, it's, sorry, through your worship, slightly different. I'm curious why an end tenancy or application to the RTV are made prior to city council adopting a rezoning permit or application.
So through your worship, again, staff are not the ones that enforce the Residential Tenancy Act or the Manufactured Home Park Tenancy Act. So if there's any question of validity of notices that are sent, that is dealt with through the province, not through the city. The city's role in that process is determining when all permits as required by law have been issued. If you own a mobile home on a mobile home park property, once all permits have been issued, and all permits would include a development permit and a rezoning if a rezoning is required, that is what we would constitute all permits required by law. It would be at that point of issuance of a development permit that you could issue a notice to end tenancy. Now, and again, that's not necessarily for the conversation today, for the task that's at hand of council, but there are other ways that you can do mutual agreements to end tenancy. How applicable those are to this particular development, again, I would really urge council to focus on the question at hand, which is use and density as proposed through the R3 zone for this particular application.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
that. Thank you. All right. Any further comment on the motion on the table? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? No, motion's carried. Thank you. Does anyone want to put number 2 on for me? Councilor Palmer.
Yeah, Mayor Souza. I'm going to put a motion that zoning amendment bylaw 2365 be read a second time. Then I can get into the conversations. I know it's deliberating.
That's fine. So seconder for that motion, Councilor Devlin. Now,
Yeah, so I'll
Councilor
speak
Palmer.
to it. Yeah, I guess one of the questions that I have for council is, how much engagement are we going to be going to a public hearing process? There's notwithstanding the stuff here, the options that staff has provided right now is that we're going to recommendation going to third reading, and then prior to adoption, those conditions as mentioned.
Right.
The options that staff have given is that, we make some changes if we're not comfortable with something. And the third, which is similar to the previous one that we adopted, is a public hearing. So I guess there's a question, does this warrant a public hearing or not? And that's more of a question right now. We can do that after adoption of the second reading if that's where council wants to go. If not, maybe there's a different direction.
Okay, so go ahead, Councilor Cherry, and then I'll.
Thanks, Your Worship. I just want to jump in and have a kind of an open discussion here. I think we were elected to make the tough decisions, and we're all sitting here with the skills and the knowledge to do that. I don't think that a public hearing is something that needs to happen on this. From the sounds of it, the applicant has already evicted almost everybody in the park. over the last decade. There's not really too many people there that are going to be affected. I'm also fearful that we continue to slow down the process by adding red tape, that we're actually doing a disservice to our community where we could be getting, how many units was it? 30 units. And right now, I believe there's just a handful. Just wanted to make that known.
Councillor Paul.
Yeah, I think those are very fair comments. I'm generally weighing to the public engagement, but this is sort of a smaller effective area. We have some comments received by the public. Some are opposed on the density here, suggesting it's too dense. I've noted, like Councillor Cherry did, that actually we're creating units, and if somebody doesn't want to live in that kind of tight quarters, well, they're not going to be buying those stratas up. You know, I could possibly go either way on this, but anyway, the second reading, I'm supportive of the second reading.
Okay, so I'll weigh in just a minute. And so, having sat around this table for a while with watching what has been happening on this piece of property, we're to the point now where you can't go back. However, moving this forward so we have some units is what I'm supportive of, and I think it would be beneficial to the community to move that forward. And if we're going to get some money, 20 grand for those 15 units to go to housing, and they're also connecting up to sewer, we're not talking septic. I think that's kind of what Mr. Black was hoping for when it came to additional resources in our community or additional housing, is that it's connected up. So I'm supportive of this moving right through, but that's just that's how I feel at this point. Councillor Devlin.
Yeah, I was just mostly going to echo what you just said. If I'd been having this conversation around this table 10 years ago, I would have a very different lens. But the situation we're in now, it's a pretty big win for the city as a whole. Yeah, I mean that's the way I look at it. So that's all.
Any other comments on second reading? Councillor Orlando.
Yeah, Your Worship. Your Worship. So I just wanted to thank staff for working on the proposal so far, getting it this forward, getting something before council, share everyone's common value in housing, in providing new housing, echo Councillor Cherry's statement and, the importance of speeding things up. And that's also, an initiative of the provincial government. I also want to, express or tell staff or say to staff that I understand very clearly distinctions between these two issues, such as provincially regulated items and items that are before council for consideration. However, my thought is that, in a leadership position on council, we're often interfacing with our boss, which is the public and residents of the community, and that these issues like it or not come back to us. People want to talk to us and they look to us for leadership in this position. And I guess my comment in general, just speaking generally, so that to provide some sort of background on references that other councillors have made today is I think it's incumbent upon us in that position to make sure that we communicate to everybody involved sort of the same message that we are being told several times today from staff, that when these issues are before us, for example, when somebody writes us a letter and expresses a general concern about something that is related to provincial legislation, that we respond to them and say that is provincial legislation, so they're clear on where they need to go forward, so that they're not left hanging. So what I'm trying to say, I guess, to keep it short, is that everyone needs to understand their rights and responsibilities in these situations, and unfortunately, that's that's a reality, and it's hard to. I'm searching for the right metaphor here. Steer the boat without the handle or whatever. It's not our purview to be dealing with provincial legislation. I'm happy to move forward with second reading. I would like to see more housing get going. Obviously, this is a priority for everyone on council. And my question is this, regarding beyond that, subsequent readings. Well, no, I'll leave it at that at second reading.
Okay. Any other comments from council? Council Lucille.
Thank you, Mayor Schultz. Yeah, I think we're so far down this path that we should look at advancing this with our tenancy protection policy. The $20,000 per manufactured home, is that set in that policy or is that negotiable?
Ms. Hartling.
Through your worship, the amenity contributions are a negotiable item for council. So if you wish to negotiate a different contribution or provide staff with a motion that's different than staff recommendation, there's an alternative recommendation there as well. Or if you would like to pursue other negotiations, that's something up to council's discretion, as amenity negotiations are or they're negotiations. So that's what staff have come up with for council's consideration.
Great, thank you, Ms. Hartling. So yeah, I would look to go back to renegotiation on that and look for a higher dollar amount per unit, and also for the 15 manufactured homes that are in the first plan, not for the 13 that the proponent has suggested. When we're talking about the effect on affordable housing, losing a trailer park to a bunch of fourplexes is a very different scope for the affordability. So that I would look to go back and renegotiate that for a higher dollar amount to put into our fund.
Okay. So any further comment on second reading, Councillor
Palmer? Yeah, so we're just on the second reading. No, I have no further comments on that.
Okay. Councillor Leno.
Your worship, thank you. I'm just seeking advice and clarity from staff. Was that a direction to staff to come back? Does that need to be formalized as part of the resolution? Because we're on a second reading as opposed to the wording of the actual.
Yeah, we're not at that point yet, but I've got Ms. Hartling and Mr. Simon both have their hands up. Do you want to weigh in?
Through your worship, so the contribution I should have clarified in front of council. It's actually based on the council adopted policy that was just recently in front of you that specifically outlines that we request 20,000 per manufactured home. So that is a procedure or policy that staff are following. So if council is wishing for additional funds, and then maybe Mr. Simon could clarify on this, just we are following a council policy at this time. So just with more direction then from staff, then ask for more.
Yeah, through your worship, to all of council, amenity negotiations in BC are a fickle area of the legislation and of legal proceedings. The big questions that you need to ask if you do want to direct staff to go back and further renegotiate, this isn't a situation where it's provide X, Y, and Z, and then we'll approve your rezoning. There's supposed to be negotiations that are done in good faith, and they're supposed to be proportionate and relative to the scale and scope of what is being requested from the developer as part of their application and the potential impact that that would have on the amenity that is being provided for in the community. So if council wants to give first reading or second reading as well, and then direct staff to go back and reevaluate the amenities that have been negotiated as part of that, certainly within the purview. But just be prepared that staff, when we do come up with these numbers, there is some logic and some rationale behind it, and you might not get a different recommendation from staff through the negotiation process.
Great, well, appreciate that. Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Mayor Sills. I wasn't going to weigh into the discussion about the amenity contribution, but it seems to be here. So just specifically on second reading, I'm supportive of that. I am not supportive of going to a subsequent motion of renegotiating the 20,000 contribution for the following reasons. One, I believe the 20,000 is consistent where the city's been in the past.
Yep.
And could create some other problems. The second is this, notwithstanding mobile home parks and the concern that council has had about losing them, sometimes those mobile home parks are not ideal living situations. And the transition in this particular case is a higher density. So we are getting more affordable housing than what we've had in the past on this lot as well. So I think there's a win. And then furthermore, and then finally on the, even if we did go back to negotiations, it's going to be incremental at best and may create more cost risk legal stuff if we were to go back. So just based on that, I'm in favor of this second reading.
Very good. Any further comment on second reading? Councillor Lund.
Your worship, I believe I understand staff's comments in that they've made a recommendation based on policy, and that any recommendation deviating from that would need to be supported with evidence, facts. So for clarity, that's would be the path of staff asked for, or if council asks staff to bring forth, renegotiate or bring forth a new proposal related to that amount. I would ask staff, and this is following to Councillor Luciao's suggestion or comment, what about in the case of if it being the purview of council to make a recommendation at the, or not make a recommendation for council to make a decision here today, for example, at council.
All right, follow up or comment from staff. Is there a comment regarding that statement? Otherwise, we'll move on.
To your worship, just, I guess, looking for clarity on what information specifically is being requested by staff right now. I might not be fully understanding it. Ms. Hartling might have caught that more specifically than I did.
But then the question is, it's not on the motion here about second reading, but it is about what Councillor Luciao has brought up about asking for more funds. So at this point in time, if council made a decision, said, you know, no, we don't want 20 grand, we want another number. That's an amenity contribution that's negotiable. It's not something that council can enforce, correct?
Negotiate. It's an amenity contribution that's negotiable, and approval of a rezoning is subject to council approval. So if council doesn't want to approve a rezoning application for whatever reasons it deems appropriate, that's a decision of council. I would encourage you, if you do direct staff to go back and renegotiate the amenities, there's principles that we need to abide by under the provincial guidance for amenity negotiations. And if there's a reason why we would go above and beyond the amenity amounts that are specified in a community amenity contribution policy, such as the tenant protection policy that council recently adopted, there would have to be very good reason to say that as a result of the development, it needs to provide a greater proportion of its share towards the amenity that it's seeking to provide benefit to. So there would have to be really good reason to actually require things that are above and beyond what we have specified in our policy.
Good, I appreciate that. Councillor Luciao.
Thank you, Commissioners. Just to go back to a comment by Councillor Palmer, when we're talking about the $20,000 being the standard for the city, is there, how far back have we been using that number?
We just passed that not very long ago.
Okay.
Is that correct?
Yeah. Sorry, I just wasn't sure if it was before that. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, good. All right, any other comments on second reading? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? No. Motion's carried unanimously. Does anyone want to put third reading on? Councillor Palmer.
The zoning amendment bylaw number 2365 be read a third time.
Okay, so seconder for that motion, Councillor Devlin. Any further discussion on that motion? Councillor Orlando and then Councillor Cherry.
Your worship, just a question for staff through the chair. What is the sequencing of those payments? Does this happen all at once or unit by unit, depending on how the development goes?
Ms. Hartling, comment on the payment procurement.
Through your worship, it would be outlined in the covenant document that would staff are recommending that gets registered on title prior to adoption, and that the payment is taken in. It would either be taken in full prior to any multifamily building being built on the lot, It is a phased development plan, so we don't have those details right now. It can either be taken in full right before first building permit issuance of the first multifamily building, or if it's per phase, that is something to be discussed and would be drafted into a covenant before council prior to adoption, if that's the route you wish to go.
Great, appreciate that. Councilor Cherry?
Nothing to add, Your Honor. Your worship. Where was I last?
All right. Any further discussion on third reading? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? No, motion's carried unanimously. All right, the adoption. Does someone want to put that motion on? Councilor Palmer?
Yeah, the prior to adoption of zoning amendment bylaw number 2365, the following conditions shall be satisfied in accordance with the official community plan bylaw number 2332. As good as Councillor Devlin. Section 4.2H and DS-24 policy section A.7CI. The owner shall register on title of a section 219 amenity contribution covenant. The covenant shall require the owner to pay an amenity contribution into the city's affordable housing reserve of $20,000 per manufactured home based on the total number of 13 manufactured homes within the original Crescent Mobile Home Park, to be paid before the owner starts the construction of any building for any multi-family residential development on the land.
Councilor Devlin, you're seconding that? Is
Just a question.
There was an error.
was there?
Not necessarily. He might have said what he meant to say.
Now, what is the problem?
It's one of the opposite.
13 as opposed to 15.
I'm reading directly from option 1. And it was, sorry,
Okay,
reading, sorry, my error, that was supposed to be 15
all right.
as per staff recommendation. Hopefully you don't want me to read it out again.
Good, you're good. And Councilor Devlin, you're seconding that motion. All right, any discussion on this motion? Councilor Orlando?
Just a quick question, what was, through the chair to maybe Seth, was the number changed at one point in this document updated or something? That came up a couple times, maybe you just misread it.
Yeah, so it's in the staff report. So
Yeah.
the applicant was trying to
Oh, okay.
reduce the number to 13th on
Yeah.
the basis, and we're basically saying, no, let's keep it to 15.
Yeah, I was just thinking maybe you were looking at an old version of the.
No, I was
the
looking
front
at
page.
the options down
Okay.
below.
Cool, thank you.
Councilor Chair?
Thanks, Your Worship. I think this is, a drop in the bucket of what we need for our
For housing?
housing. I don't see any reason to drop to 13.
Yeah.
If we're talking about units, this might not even produce one affordable housing unit. This is quite a small amount, though that to us may not be the same way to the applicant, but I'm supportive of this. And thankful that we were able to get our mobile home policy, redevelopment policy passed prior to this coming to council.
Good. Any further comments on the motion on the table? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? No motion's carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Hartling, Mr. Simon, and the proponent. We're now moving on. Item 9D.
Amenity break.
Amenity break, fine, we'll take a break.
Okay.
All right.
Steve, would you mind muting that, please?
Ms. Delaselle, can you put the notice up or take?
Thanks, Cindy.
Ms. Delisle, we're ready to reignite this meeting.
Did we unmute?
Yeah. Ready to go?
Your worship.
Thank you. All right, council, item 9D. Ms. Hartling, are you still with us? Do you want to weigh in a little bit on this, as Ms. Rousseau's not here?
Sorry, it was on backwards there. Through your worship, this is for the road closure.
Yes.
Yes, this application is for road closure for a portion in behind the two properties. The original application was for a portion. I'll check. Let me just bring it up on the screen here as a visual. There's no presentation, but I am here to answer questions. And can also just show. You can see the screen in front of you, Your Worship.
Yes, thank you.
So yeah, the proposed road closure is in behind lot 6 and lot 7. Originally, they looked at a portion of Pearson Street 2 as for their property, and after referral comments and going through operations and staff comments, the city wants to retain this, but have no need for the land in behind lot 6 and lot 7. Lot 1 adjacent to them went through a road closure previously, so this lane was closed off. Where you see the statutory right of way, it's closed off next to lot 1. So the staff are supportive of lot 6 and lot 7 having the proposed road closure to be amalgamated with lot 6 and lot 7. And in the staff report, it outlines the procedures under the road closure policy, council policy. So the portion of the road to be closed off for 807, 801 3rd Street West, that the road closure bylaw be read a first, second, and third time. And prior to adoption, as it outlined in the policy, no build covenant on lot 7 and 6 with regard to environmental sensitive hazardous areas, as the rear portion of the property does abut the Columbia River. And so there's portions on there that are environmental sensitive, and it's next to a steep slope. So prior to adoption, that the owner has that registered on title, and that advertisements as per the council policy be published in the newspaper.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from council? I'm familiar with this piece of property. Gentleman that owns it has built that property up kind of behind his house over the years and has grassed in the area. So he's got a bit of a backyard. As Ms. Hartling has indicated, the property next door to his two properties there has been sold to the homeowner as well, and that alley is now closed off. So this is an appropriate way of us getting rid of this property and allowing these people to use this property. Councilor Stapenhurst.
Yes, sir. So if I understand what you're saying, the owner of lot 6 is also the owner of lot 1. Is that?
That's correct.
Okay.
No, just a minute. Lot 7 and lot 6. Lot 1 and lot 4, those plots or those have been sold off to another person down the road. So lot 6, lot 7 are owned. So lot 6 has a rental property on it. Lot 7 is where the proponent lives. Is that correct, Ms. Hartling?
Through your worship, that's correct. Lot 6 and 7 are the same owner that's under the subject road closure. Neighboring lot 1 is a different property owner that successfully went through a road closure with prior council.
Just
a follow-up question through the chair to how did we come up with the price tag of $22,890 for these two pieces of?
It's assessment, wasn't it, or appraisal, pardon me?
Through your worship, yeah, there's a requirement in the council policy for the applicant to have an appraisal completed for staff review. The applicant had the appraisal completed for the original proposal, which was also including proposed road closure next to lot 7 along Pearson Street. Our staff did not support that, so they removed that from the total assessment or appraisal. So that number that you see in front of you is by a professional appraised report, which is for that subject area.
Councillor Stephenhurst and Councillor Cherry.
So, and the reason why I asked that is because when I look at BC assessment and I look at the land value as it sits right now, and I take, if I'm looking at 807 3rd Street West, the land value is $629,000 and the land size is 5,000 square feet, which roughly works out to $125 a square foot. But when I look at how much we're getting in return to what we're giving away, it works out to roughly $75 a square foot. So I'm just kind of confused as to how we got such a low number.
Well,
in
this
comparison to the
is
property.
done by a professional appraiser, so that's a question you have to ask them. Councillor Cherry, and I'll come back to that, Councillor.
Thanks, Your Worship. Through the chair, to any staff member that can answer this. From looking at Google Earth's overhead satellite view versus what's presented to us, I'm just looking for clarification on where it says Pearson Street here. Is that a right of way and not the actual street? Like that's just the
That's
green
correct,
area?
it's the right of way.
Okay, then I'm looking at the right properties. Thank you.
Councillor Palmer.
Yeah, I have some questions. I'm not sure if you want, similar, I guess. Not sure if you want those now or the motion on the table first.
Yeah, let's put the motion on the table. All right. Someone want to make the first motion? Well, Councillor Devlin is anxious to read that.
I'll get my spot back. I move the mayor and corporate officer be authorized to execute an agreement to sell a 303.8 meter square portion of unconstructed city right of way that runs along the eastern parcel boundaries of 807 and 801 3rd Street West, and for consolidation of the unconstructed city right of way within 807 and 801 3rd Street West, with the final agreement subject to council approval and the adoption of a road closure bylaw.
Second for her motion. Councillor Orlando, were you raising your hand for that?
I was counting with my fingers.
No.
I'm sorry, Your Worship. Not moving as long as fast, I think, but I'm really sucking it. Yes.
Okay, good. Councillor Orlando. Now, discussion. Do you have some questions, Councillor Palmer?
Yeah, so through the mayor to staff. So there was mention about environmentally sensitive. Is there any geotechnical concerns about the slumping on that bank and behind?
Ms. Harlan?
Through your worship, that would be required with a covenant that a geotechnical assessment be completed and identified the areas for no build. Staff's understanding from the proponent is that they're to remain using this as their yard, to formally have it as their yard for their house. If there was any construction, it might be a maximum of a fence, but that would have to be outlined in a geotechnical report if anything at all can be built on that property, and if there's any mitigation works would be outlined in a recommendation by a geotechnical assessment. So that prior to adoption, staff are recommending that that covenant with report be completed.
Councillor Palmer, follow.
Yeah, so then through to the director of engineering. So the road along there, so that bank sort of continues to the end of Pearson. Is it Pearson Street? That has a history of slumping. There's been repairs multiple times and fairly extensive work on the roadway. It's on 3rd. And then there's a storm line, I believe, that goes down there. Is there any sort of, like, with that history, just further to notwithstanding the covenants and all that kind of thing, but is there any, do you have, from an engineering perspective, any concerns about the slumping of that slope?
Mr. White.
Through your worship to council and to Councillor Palmer, I do not have any real concerns about that slump. We do acknowledge that the work that happened on 3rd Street, or I will let you know that the work that was done 3 years ago, I believe, on 3rd Street was due to rotting materials that mostly wood that has continued to rot because it's no longer underwater. And so that was the cause of the settlement in that area. We also understand that the storm drain pipe in Pearson from basically Victoria to the outfall in the river has not been maintained properly and is needing of a rebuild. That is part of our budget discussion for this coming year. And so we will be looking at rebuilding that storm drain system and the outfall, which should address any concerns from a public infrastructure side. Other than that, we have no other worries from the public being being at risk at this location where the Pearson right of way extends.
And then, Mayor Souls, you made the comment that over the years, that land in the back to get the lawn, the yard has been built up. So there's been, and there's unknown materials of building up that. Does that loading on the top of that slope create any further concerns through the mayor?
I would be hesitant to comment on that. As the process is outlined, we'll get a geotech to let us know what the concerns are. There's a reason why geotechs pay the highest liability insurance of all the engineering profession, even above structural engineers. So I think we can get some more information once that appraisal or that report has been completed.
And I think this property, if he added to that, was back in the 60s. Early 60s, mid 60s, that basically put some soil down.
Then a question to staff, I'm not sure which staff, but BC Hydro has some responsibility on the reservoir and they've recently done work in the golf course required. So have we had direct dialogue or has there been referral to BC Hydro? And if there has, what have their comments been?
Any comment, Ms. Hartling, regarding that?
Through your worship, it was referred out to BC Hydro. I can just see if they did reply here. Just one moment.
Your worship, in the meantime, Ms. Hartling's looking that up. Just for clarification again, this would remove all liability from the city for those lands?
Correct.
Which I think is.
disagree with that, actually.
You disagree?
Yeah, I'll just see on this.
Councilor Lucien?
Thanks, Mayor Schultz. Just a question to Director Black. Does the city run snow removal down that laneway?
No, it doesn't exist.
No.
So it's the end, there's no laneway anymore.
Okay.
It's a paper. It's just not paper.
It's just on paper.
Yeah.
Through your worship, it was not referred out to BC Hydro. It was referred out to all internal departments for comment: RCMP, Public Works, Parks, Rec, Culture, Fire, Finance, Corporate Services, but not external agencies.
Councilor Plum.
Yeah, so, and then just a comment on, forget that side street again, Pierce. So currently there is encroachment of an old vehicle and some other stuff from the.
There's a couple of trees growing on there and there probably is a vehicle sitting there.
Yeah. So, Mayor Souls, I am opposed to this. I would say I'm fairly strongly opposed to this. I'm the geotech aspects I don't think are well understood. We shouldn't even be contemplating this without having a fairly thorough report and good understanding from BC Hydro. A little bit of the history. I'm certainly familiar with some of the history. I think that Don Viganu is the administrator and Dr. Battersby was the mayor at the time when that other portion of the lane doesn't have the same sensitivity as these properties. It's further back from the bank. However, I think that was a mistake and certainly the applicant had was quite opposed to that at the time and vocally opposed. Subsequently, I think that was fairly well known in that era. Anyway, that was a mistake of the past in my opinion. The future is when we're looking at that. So the unknowns of the geotech, the instability of that bank. And if we release this land, I think there is, if not direct legal liability for, you know, having knowledge of land that's not stable. But furthermore, our ability to deal with some future things or BC Hydro. The applicant, well, I've been on I've been on the property and I've seen the house itself is already slumping. And I think this is would be a big mistake of selling this property for those reasons.
Okay. Any other comments from council? Councilor Cherry.
Thanks, your worship. Just looking at recent photos from a neighboring property that's listed for sale. The lands in questions are already fenced off and being used as the resident's backyard.
Correct.
I don't see how selling the land wouldn't remove us from liability. I'm open to exploring that, of course, but I mean, once they put the fence up, they've already blocked access to it from a legal standpoint, correct?
Mayor Souls, I guess that was one of the points, was, have you received legal on this? But I think there's substantial legal advice. I can't certainly directly give legal advice on that. But yes, there is encroachments. The city hasn't followed up. We've got lots of encroachments all over the city. It doesn't mean they're acceptable or that we should just proceed with that. I think it's a mistake.
Ms. Hartling, Mr. Simon.
To your worship and to council, just to provide some clarity on the process that this goes through. Once, should council endorse this, then there is a formal purchase contract that gets arranged, and it is in that purchase contract that it goes between the legal parties of the city and the proponent. And that is where the proponent would likely just be purchasing the lands as is and assuming any liability as part of that as part of that property real estate transaction.
Ms. Hartling, and then I'll go back to you.
Through your worships, it's still to go through the notification process if council is supportive of this road closure to this point in time. So go through the notification process, and then also in the council procedure, there is an item that talks about stability of land, and it should the proposed road closure area be considered to be possibly unstable, the property owner wishing to obtain the closed area will be required to obtain a geotechnical report. So we wouldn't require them to have that prior to this meeting. It would be a condition we would place if we are entertaining the road closure. So there's an order of items to be requested through the council policy.
Great, thank you. Councilor Palmer, then Councilor Stapler.
So Mayor Souls, and I'll probably have to just let it go, but the going into the process, it's marching on towards this. Without this knowledge, I don't think we should be even considering selling the property. I think I made my point clear enough.
Councilor Stapler. And then
Yeah.
Councilor Orlando.
Thank you, Mayor Saul. I just want to say that I think geotechnical concerns aside, I'm kind of deeply concerned by the fact that the applicant hired a third-party appraisal to come up with a number of $22,000. When I look at it through a different lens, we're looking at two adjoining properties that are going to have unobstructed waterfront views down the Columbia River. It's going to be a gorgeous property. It's going to be prime for redevelopment. And I think the value there is a lot more than what we're receiving. So that's my concern with what's in front of us right now.
Ms. Hartling, you still have your hand up. Do you want to weigh in further?
If I may, through your worship, just to address Councillor Stephenhurst's comment. The appraisal is not before council. It does get reviewed by our financial director. So all appraisals, they do have a method of appraisal and what that land is going to be used at, and if it can actually be subdivided and used for residential use in the future. So part of the appraisal is looking at limitations, scope of work, and then they present the data. So they look at the neighborhood, land use controls, and they get into analysis and conclusion and highest best use of land, how they appraised it, direct comparison approach throughout the neighborhood. They look at a final estimate value, if there's any reductions that they're eligible for. So it's quite a thorough document. This one's 47 pages of what they went through. That has been reviewed by the Finance Department's director. I don't think they're on the meeting today. I don't think it's typical to include the appraisal for a public meeting. There's a lot of private information there, but if that's something that is to be included with the report, I think that would be outlined in the council procedures, or I'm not sure if corporate administration has anything to add, but it is quite a thorough appraisal.
So your worship, through to Councillor Palmer, Director Moore did give me a little update saying that the financial implications section spells out very clearly what the financial implications are, and that any proceeds received from the sale of this land will get transferred to the land sale reserve as per legislative requirements.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Orlando, you had your hand up.
Oh, your worship, yeah, I just wanted to make a quick comment that anything geotechnical is way out of my wheelhouse. You know, generally with staff, I just trust that staff will consider the liabilities on the city and proceed accordingly with safety as possible. And no qualification to comment on relative risk.
Councillor Palmer, one last time.
Yeah, just on the financial, contributions, I doubt the assessment included access to that side, whether that's BC Hydro or the local government for doing whatever work needs to be done in the future. And again, we've seen that with BC Hydro in multiple locations and with the city more recently along 3rd Avenue. So we may be passing on significant costs to the city in the future. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments on the motion on the table? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? Note Councillor Palmer, Councillor Stapenhurst are opposed. The rest of council's in favor. This motion passes. Number 2, someone want to put that on for me? Councillor Devlin.
Move that road closure bylaw number 2367 be ready first, second, and third time.
Seconder for the motion, please. I'll second it. All right, any further discussion on the road closure bylaw? Seeing none, all those in favor of that? Opposed? Note Councillor Stapenhurst, Councillor Palmer are opposed. Moving on to item number 3, Councillor Devlin.
I move that prior to adoption, the owner registers a section 219 number build covenant or no build covenant on the titles of lot 7 and lot 6 with regards to environmentally sensitive and hazardous areas, and that the city approved geotechnical report for these lands be attached to the no build covenant.
Seconder for that motion, please. Councillor Cherry. Further discussion on that motion, Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Mayor Souls. I'm probably in favor, even though I'm deeply concerned about the previous motions. I'm probably in favor of this. Question through to staff. How extensive is the no build covenant? Does that include greenhouses, sheds under 100 square feet, that kind of thing?
Ms. Hartley?
Through to Council Palmer, through your worship. The no build covenant would be attached with the geotechnical report. So we'd require the geotechnical report first, outlining that they need to distinguish the no build area and if there's any exceptions to that. But typically, if there's any exceptions, they require an additional geotechnical report with those uses. So if the owner wanted to put a shed or a fence, it's likely we can look at that, they need an addendum to that report. And in the future, if they're doing any works, they would also require a development permit for that in that area. So right now, because there's no proposed works, we're requiring a no build with a geotechnical assessment. But if they want to do any works within the riparian area or the steep slopes development permit area, they will require an additional application to the city for a development permit, and then they would need to update that report with an addendum.
Thank you, Mayor Souls. I will be in favor of the motion, although I do believe it's the cart before the horse. We have all these concerns, unknowns about the geotechnical, and so we're just going blindly into a land sale. But this is better than nothing.
Good. Councillor Lucien.
Thank you, Miracles. Just a question where you talked about how they have a fence already blocking off the laneway. If that encroaches on the geotechnical report, what is our course of action then? Or
So I'm not sure that fence is theirs or the people that bought the other part of the land.
okay,
So that's the one thing that I know that they would like to build a fence, but there may be a portion of the fence on that lot number 6 or 7 that's right beside the other one, but doesn't go all the way down. It only goes to the end of that property.
okay,
And then the other fence that's on there is up higher because they brought in fill and they built for their lot number 1.
okay.
Right? Councillor Cherry.
Thanks, Your Worship. I'm curious, to whoever staff might know the answer to this, if we're able to put a no subdivision clause on these lands.
Ms. Hartland, comment?
Through your worship, that would be in the zoning bylaw for the size restriction. So currently these lots aren't large enough to subdivide. I mean, that is something that you could have within the covenant for no subdivision. So that is up to council's discretion, but typically we would have it the zone for the subject property. And if the property was eligible for subdivision, they would require that development permit for steep slopes and geotechnical to prove out that's even feasible.
Mr.
There's
Simon,
To your worship, thank you. And I'll just keep it really, really short. I guess we're trying to understand what council's intent with something like that would be. It's really important that we keep in mind the nature of what this application request ultimately is. It's to close a very small portion of the area and secure it in a way where the property is already being informally used. So it just formalizes that. So trying to understand, I guess, what the intent of a no subdivide covenant would be and how that's related to the request that's before council today.
Councillor Cherry.
Thanks, Your Worship. Through to Mr. Simon. My fear is that we're disposing of land at a pretty discounted rate that could be used and be much more valuable to the applicant if he was able to subdivide at a future date. I understand that there's going to be building restrictions either way, and it's going to be subject to a geotech, but I would hate for the taxpayer to lose out on what would be much more valuable if that was a possibility. So I just don't want that to be a loophole in the future. I'm looking at this in a 10 or 20 year outlook, not, a 30-day outlook. The property.
Comment, Mr. Simon?
No comment, just recommend council really consider the nature of what's being proposed. And if there's concerns about hypothetical subdivision and council deems it appropriate to make a condition that there's no subdivide covenant, then I would leave it with you guys.
Okay. Councillor Palmer, you had your hand up.
Obviously the applicant's getting kind of a steal of a deal of increased land size and valuation on their property. Just a question on the no build covenant, is that only on the portion that we're selling or is it on the entire backyard?
Ms. Hartland?
Through to Councillor Palmer, the geotechnical assessment would be the areas that are within next to the steep slope area. So if I did share the mapping, it's primarily just abutting the land to be closed. One of the properties does have a no build covenant already on it. I believe when that soil was placed on that property. So this would be an update in addition to those properties and a new assessment today of what the current conditions are. So that is something that is over the proposed lands, but it would be registered on the whole property. So it would apply to the entire property of what the geotech has assessed as a no build area. So it could go over additional part of their property if that's what they have assessed, but we don't know this time.
Follow up, Councillor?
No.
Okay. Any further discussion on the motion on the table? All those in favor? Opposed? Note Councillor Stapenhurst is opposed.
Correction, sir, I was in favor of the comment.
Okay, all right, good, thank you. Unanimous. Number 4, Councillor Devlin.
Move that advertisements of council's intention to close and sell the road closure area be published in the newspaper as per section 40 and 94 of the community charter.
Second for that motion, Councillor Cherry.
I do have a question, Your
Go
Worship.
ahead.
Will anybody in the public be then able to purchase this property? Or is
No.
this, no? Okay.
Am I correct on that? Mr. Simon, Ms. Hartling.
The only abutting neighbor is a lot that's already purchased a road closure. And so they would get a notification, but no, it's abutting the neighboring property. It's south of their land. Staff would not support the neighboring property purchasing land in behind the other property.
Just your worship, through the chair, question for staff. Then following on Council Chair's question, then when we advertise it, well, are we seeking like feedback on yes or no, or what?
Notification only, is it not?
Yeah,
Sorry.
notification.
Yeah, it's a notification. It says it does say persons who feel that the proposed road closure bylaw may affect their interests may provide a written submission to City Council indicating how their interests are affected.
Mr. Simon, you have your hand up. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Ms. Hartling, do you have
It's
more?
okay.
Through your worship, just to clarify the intent of the notification, picture a development where you have an undeveloped road allowance, a property on each side, one property applies to close it. The whole point of doing notification is so that the adjacent property owner could purchase half of the closed road allowance. In this particular case, there would be no one else that the city would be supportive of sending it to from staff's perspective, or selling it to rather.
Because he owns both properties.
To your worship, yes, that is correct.
Okay. Mr.
If I
Black.
may, sorry to interrupt. Typically, it would go back to the parent parcel. So when you subdivide a piece of land, you build a lot, a road. The road never gets built. Half of that road would then go to each party on either side of it. So it goes back to the original configuration, if that helps the discussion.
All right. Okay, any further comments on this? Saying none, all those in favor? Opposed? No, motion carried. Thank you. All right, moving on to 11A, staff reports, development permit application for 1187 Nickel Road and 1800 Williamson Lake Road. Do you have a presentation, Mr. Simon?
Through your worship, no, I'll spare you guys the benefit of listening to me further. From staff's perspective, this is a very minor development permit, and based on our procedure bylaw, it is required to go before council for a decision. So with that, we are available for any questions that you may have.
Okay, someone want to put the motion on the table and we can discuss it. Councillor Devlin.
I move that development permit be issued for form and character and development within an environmentally hazardous and environmentally sensitive area to construct a golf course irrigation pump house at 1887 Nickel Road / 1800 Williamson Lake Road. Stuff in brackets. And that's it.
The seconder for that motion, please. Councillor Lucero. Discussion on the motion. Councillor Stapleton.
Just a quick question for staff. Do we know of any chemicals that will be stored in the pump house? And I asked that having just received a tour of the water treatment facility plant. So I'm wondering if there's any chemicals that will be stored.
Through your worship, none that staff are aware of, but if there were any, they would have to be stored in accordance with provincial requirements and legislation, which is not something that we would be governing. That's through the Ministry of Environment.
Councillor Lynn.
Your worship, thank you. Just a question of staff for clarity and just sort of general knowledge. This is a form and character development permit. So what is council considering for this? Where's our sort of boundaries on this particular application?
Mr. Simon, comment.
Through your worship, Councillor Orlando, this actually falls within the Revelstoke Mountain Resort DP area, which is 3 different types of development permit areas: development within an environmentally hazardous area, so things that are subject to landslide, steep slopes, an environmentally sensitive area, riparian area, sensitive aquatic habitat, and then also the form and character. So we're considering all 3. Staff have gone through and pulled out the applicable policies from the CD8 zone, which contains the development permit area guidelines. And again, within the scope of what's being applied for, there's no environmentally sensitive lands, no environmentally hazardous lands. And from a form and character perspective, the proposed building does match what is contemplated at the resort right now, and it will be buffered through a substantial tree network as well. So no one will really even see this pump house.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Any further comments on the motion, Councillor Cherry?
Thanks, Your Worship. Although I was not in town, I was listening into the ABC meeting that Councillor Devlin attended in my place. They were consulted and just want to read out their comments. The proposed development of the golf course, residential buildings, clubhouse, and pump house aligns with the applicable development permit area guidelines, is compatible with the surrounding neighborhood.
Thank you for that. Any other comments from council? Councillor Palmer?
So just a question, so this pump house, through the planner, so as you mentioned, it's kind of like a pretty small thing. And it seems a little bit odd to me that we're dealing with this tiny little thing where there's this big golf course going, and it seems like it should be part of a bigger package of, on the whole golf course. And could you just comment in context why this is being brought to council at this time? There's a big water body that's being, reservoir that's being proposed there. And so I'm just trying to understand why we're dealing with this relatively small item in the context of a big development.
Through your worship, the golf course itself is an incredibly complicated and convoluted approval system that we're currently working through with respective provincial partners and proponent to try and keep that golf course application moving. Because of how complex that application is and the scheduling and desires of the proponent to get something moving sooner rather than later, they sought to apply for this through a separate development permit rather than tying it to the broader golf course, which has much more stipulations because it is for a very large area of land to be developed as a golf course.
Yeah, so then just for clarity, then the agent, I'm assuming, is building this building and they plan to construct it basically right away, kind of thing?
Through your worship, yes, that is correct. They would like to get going this year, so they have applied for a building permit as well as a development permit. And yes, it is one of the local contractors who was successful in getting this project.
And then just a final question. You said that people won't see this. Will golfers see this building?
Through your worship, we would still need to actually see the overall final designs of the golf course to understand where this would fit in. That's a good question as to whether or not they would see it. I don't assume that they would be seeing it as a golfer.
And then just a final comment, I'll be in support of this. The building itself, it's a residential quality tin shack. It doesn't inspire me as a world-class golf course that's being suggested at all. Disappointing in a way, but anyway, that's outside our purview.
Appreciate your comment. Any other comments on the motion? Saying none, all those in favor? Opposed, motion's carried. Good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Simon. Moving on to item 11B.
Someone needs a Snickers.
Someone want to put that, is there a presentation on that, Mr. Simon? Or can we just put the motion on the table and ask questions?
Through your worship, if council wants to put the resolution on the table, staff would be in support of that. Again, you've heard a lot from myself and Ms. Hartling today.
Okay, so Devlin, Councillor Devlin, you want to read this one?
Sure, why not? I move that development permit be issued for form and character for the construction of a multi-use building with parking and landscaping at 1160 Powerhouse Road, stuff in brackets.
Seconder for the motion, please, Councillor Rousseau. Discussion on this. So basically a multi-use industrial building where there was use of a property for a trucking company at Park Trucks. And I think they even at one time might have stored some of the vehicles there. And other than that, now they're going to formally build something. And then in our package, it's got several uses for that. Have I pretty much given that, Mr. Simon, any comments?
Through your worship, I've seen Ms. Hartling. I think her headset is working now, but again, yeah, it's a forming character development permit. So regardless of the uses that are permitted, council's approving the appearance of the structure on site, and Ms. Hartling may have some to add on to that.
Good, Ms. Hartling.
Yeah, through your worship, sorry about that. My headset was dying. I had to quickly charge it. I'm back on for a portion of it. Hopefully it lasts. So the application in front of you is an industrial development permit for an proposed multi-use building for a car wash and repair areas. So it is going to council as the size of it is over the size exception for a delegated development permit. So in front of council today is a form and character development permit. So you're looking at the site landscaping and then also the exterior building materials of proposed multi-use industrial building. It's accessed off of Powerhouse Road. You can see the building materials in front of you are light gray, dark gray metal cladding, gray metal doors, white overhead doors, gray wood fascia, and glazed panels. It's consistent with the form and character and look of the industrial neighborhood. It's primarily surrounded by vacant properties and industrial properties, and then the city's sewage treatment plant across the street. Staff feel that it is in line with the development permit area guidelines and do recommend that the development permit be issued and that a landscape security is taken in the amount of 125% of the estimate prior to building permit issuance.
Councilor Cherry and the Councilor Lucien.
Thanks, Your Worship. In my opinion, this aligns with the neighborhood. We're getting an application on a property that's been pretty barren forever. So I do appreciate this is coming forward. It has gone out to the APC and they are in support.
Good. Councilor Lucien.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioners. Just wondering if this building will have a water meter on it?
This is form and character, so.
So that won't come up. Yeah, I think. Sorry.
We'll have one on the outside.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's just when we talk about a car wash, and dealing with the water restrictions we had over the summer, questions about the water metering, if it's drawing treated, water from the municipality, and if the building will, be affected if there are water restrictions in the future.
All right, so do any of you want to answer that question? Mr. Black?
Thank you, Your Worship. We will require a meter at the appropriate time, however, now is not that time. Is there any more?
Nope, that was it. Thank you.
All right. Someone, Councilor Devlin, did you have a comment? Councilor Stapleton?
I did ask about the metered water.
Councilor Orlando? No comments?
My comment is, yeah, nice to see an industrial use in the industrial area. Looks like a nice building. Good to see people opening up new business and moving forward. Exciting. Looks nice. Looks sharp, I guess. Department Chair, looks sharp.
There will be a water meter. Will be a water meter. It'll be $2 for 15 seconds.
All those in favor? Opposed, motion's carried. Number 2, Councilor Devlin.
Move that the owner provide security for the due and proper completion of landscaping in the amount of 125% of the amount identified in the cost estimate to the city of Revelstoke in form of cash or unconditional irrevocable auto renewing letter of credit issued by a Canadian Chartered Bank or credit union prior to an issuance of a building permit.
Second for the motion, Councilor Cherry. Any further discussion on the motion? Saying none. All those in favor? Opposed? No, motion's carried. Thank you. Moving on to communications, Revelstoke and Area Economic Development Committee. So Councilor Orlando, do you have comment on those minutes?
Yeah, Your Worship, just a verbal update on some of the things going on. I want to zero in on the topic of childcare, and then I'll just mention briefly some of the other items. Joanna Gawler from Revelstoke After School Society, which is a volunteer nonprofit looking to bridge that time between when school ends and when parents are done work. So thank you to them for what they've been doing. She presented the committee, talked about ongoing challenges. So it was a great opportunity to get some ideas and some minds together and add a economic development lens to this issue, of course, of which is a big deal because parents can't work or have to limit their work or hold their career back or can't afford childcare. So some of the actionable items, this that came up in discussion, we're talking about an ongoing provincial level initiative that has engaged former school superintendent to work on clarifying that up. The provincial ministry Ministry of Education has actually changed their name to include childcare and are working ongoing and actively on initiatives to sort of move towards that school and let's get it to the end of the day. So that's good at the provincial level. Locally, at the council level, we will see a recommendation coming from CED staff from an advisory function to see what we can do from that lens to assist the conversation, get people together, find solutions that will help families in the community. So it's great to see that. Yeah, just all in all, a great discussion. In the past, staff have worked to find new space after at the rec center for after school support staff. I know, for example, myself was involved in developing the skate park, and thank you to the staff at the skate camp as just one example of the many dozens and dozens, hundreds of people in our community who are providing educational childcare opportunities in public space, private space, summer and after school. So I just want to say this is a big issue and it's something we are working on from this lens here. So thank you to everyone involved in that. Real quick, because I know we've been here for a long time, tech strategy update. We had some short brief updates on some the data dashboard and other tech project initiatives. Housing Fund has been Housing Accelerator Fund. Thank you to staff member Taha Atia for his part within CED on getting that CMHC application to the federal government. It's a big ticket item for housing, and fingers crossed. Destination Management Plan, I'm having meetings this week, and staff are having ongoing meetings on continuing that long-term vision process for the city as it deals with the many multifaceted impacts of being a world-class a destination that attracts people from all over the world to world-class opportunities here, and how we can have an active response to that and manage the pressures that create for that for the maximum benefit of the community. And that's it. And just thank you to everyone who volunteers on that committee and staff for their hard work.
Ms. Braun, comment.
What he said.
Awesome. All right, Ms. Delasell, any questions from the press?
There are no questions from the press, Your Worship.
Awesome. All right, so we're down to number 17. Councillor Stapenhurst, do you want to make a motion to terminate?
Yes, sir.
All right, and seconded by Councillor Devlin. All in favor? Motion's carried. Very done. Thank you all.
Oh my God. 3 hours.
Nailed it.
You did?
Text message.